I would like to call tonight's meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll? Here.
Present.
Councilmember Schlegel,
Present.
Councilmember Gilbert,
Here.
Councilmember Hanzak,
Present.
Councilmember Westbrook.
Here.
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your patience as we get our materials together for tonight's meeting. Just running through the agenda for this evening, we will have our legislative update. Just want to make sure. Yep, our legislative update, followed by public comments on voting items, general public comments, council comments, city manager comments, and then we will have a presentation from the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, DCHA Rental Inspection Program. In terms of the voting session, we have a single reading ordinance approving the DHCA rental inspection contract, single reading ordinance authorizing the use of the State Revitalization Program National Capital Economic Development NED Grant Award to preserve affordable housing at 7520 Maple Ave. And I am just going to quadruple check with the clerk. I believe that we did have an agenda change where we are removing the consent agenda from voting this evening. It will be moved to a future agenda, and that item was the consent agenda that consists of appointments to boards and committees. And then we will have a work session tonight on council priorities. In terms of upcoming agendas, on Wednesday, March the 5th, the council will have its legislative update, presentation on the library construction project update, voting session on the resolution adopting council priorities, work session, budget amendment number 3, process for restricting as well as process for restricting parking at properties with limited frontage. On Wednesday, March the 12th, the city council will be meeting at 12:30. We will have the legislative update, the city manager overview of the recommended FY26 budget, the department budget presentation part 1, city manager's office, information technology, human services, ARPA, finance, city clerk, and communications. We will also have voting sessions, first reading ordinance approving the FY25 budget amendment number 3, first reading ordinance amending Tacoma Park Code 13.20.040 A9, parking on standing prohibited areas. And then we will have a work session, eligible uses of community development block grant funds. On Wednesday, March the 19th, the city council will meet at its regular time, 7:30 p.m. We will have a legislative update and presentations. The first is the department budget presentations, part 2, Public Works Department and Stormwater, Housing and Community Development, and Library. We will also have a presentation on recommendations for the FY26 sidewalk and traffic calming projects. We will have voting sessions. The voting session will consist of 3 items. Second reading ordinance approving FY25 budget amendment number 3. First reading ordinance amending Tacoma Park Code 13.20.040 A9, parking or standing prohibited areas. And resolution repealing resolution 2016-16 regarding eligible uses of community development block grant funds. And so with that, I am going to move to our next item. We have no proclamations this evening, so we'll be moving to our legislative update. And we are joined by our lobbyists in Annapolis, Ann Seacott.
Hi, good evening, everybody. So we are just a little past the halfway mark for session, and I will have to start off with the news of things are not looking good budget-wise. The legislature will start making decisions about budget cuts in the next week or so. We are, hearing from legislators that they are fully expecting that federal actions will compound the already really bad budget picture for the state. And they may reflect some of that in their budget decisions now. It's both budget cuts and any revenue enhancements. But they are also talking about quite likely coming back in a special session, perhaps in the fall. So, everybody is kind of bracing themselves for what may take place, some of the actions with the federal government. So it's not good stuff, but it's stuff that we all need to be aware of and prepare for. So with that, all the things that we're doing, the other things that we're doing in Annapolis really matter in terms of establishing good policies and seeing what we can do to protect programs that we need to protect communities and to also see if there are ways to generate revenue. So we have this week weighed in on a number of issues, and late last week related to good cause eviction, building energy performance standards, and some on the revenue front supporting legislation put forth by the Maryland Municipal League related to food and beverage taxes that the city hasn't talked about in terms of doing anything like that, but it's about in various ways. There are pieces of legislation just to give municipalities the authority to look at how it raises revenue. The good news front is that the unlawful restrictive covenants bill has passed the Senate. And we don't really anticipate a problem in the House. It won't get a hearing in the House for a couple of weeks. And we do see the Renew Act will have is on the voting list in the Senate for tomorrow as well. So we'll keep an eye on how that goes. I think that things are looking favorable for some version of the bill. We'll have to see what the amendments are that the committee takes. I think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ann. And I just want to, in terms of the food and beverage tax, because I know that we submitted testimony in support of that. And one of the things that I think maybe wasn't very clear was the, at one point there was a discussion about like whether or not the county, if the counties were to take steps to implement this F&B max up to 3%, that it would basically municipalities would be able to supersede, so to speak, the county's actions. I know at one point there was a question about who gets the money first, right? So if a county puts a resolution forward, that will then allow it to implement the F&B tax, then they would get recoup the funds from the different businesses within their community. But if municipalities, whether before or after, also implemented their own resolution, they then would be able to recoup those funds. Has there been any change in that at all that you're aware of, or nothing to that effect? Okay.
No, and we're keeping in contact with the Maryland Municipal League on that, just to I think this is one of their priorities, so I think they are very intent on making sure that that stays intact.
Yeah, and just for colleagues, this actually, and just some anecdotal conversations I've had with some business owners, they're like, max up to 3%. It's paid for by the patron, not necessarily by us. You guys can do it. It's not that much sweat off their backs. And I know that the director of the MML, Teresa, had mentioned in a conversation that she had with elected officials more recently, that she was surprised at the support that she was getting, or she was hearing from restaurateurs and the like as well, that there really wasn't a lot of pushback from a business standpoint about this particular bill. I don't know, Ann, if you're hearing anything different, but.
No, we're not hearing a lot of negative. I mean, there's just in general the debate on taxes. But I think that this one is seen as more of an authority kind of bill as opposed to something that's going to proactively raise taxes for folks.
Right. Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Landman?
Hi, and just a quick question about the legislation that Delegate Charkoudian has been advancing on allowing for local producers of agricultural goods to sell their products for the school lunch program. That was a reintroduction from last year. Have you seen any sign of that moving in the House or Senate at this point? That's something that Food Force Collaborative is very interested in.
Right. No, I have not. I'm happy to track it down and see where it is.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schlegel?
Thank you. Ms. Seacat, have you any further details or any resources we could check out to see any forecasts that the legislature is looking at in terms of this bad budget picture you're referencing?
So I don't know what might be in writing. It's a topic of conversation in the budget hearings. Many of the agency heads are getting asked, and what could this mean in terms of like, for example, there was a big topic conversation in the budget hearing for Medicaid. Given some of the changes that are being bandied about related to Medicaid. I don't know that there's anything right now that's in writing on that. There may very well be something. I think part of what's happening is folks are trying to get through this session and the $3 billion deficit that the state had before some of these the new administration took office. So I think that they're struggling with trying to figure out what can they do to sort of be protective without assuming the worst, because the worst would be probably at least doubling of that deficit. And so they're trying not to just make that much, double the amount of cuts that they need to make. So there's nothing. What would be in writing right now would be very hypothetical, right? It would be, well, if this happens, then that happens. So I'm sure people are writing it, are doing those analyses probably internally. I've not seen anything yet in writing publicly.
Thank you. And are there, as one quick follow-up, are there any, are you hearing conversation about impacts on state income tax receipts, which is significant for us since we received some of that?
Sure. I mean, I think folks are really worried about the federal layoffs, what that's going to do to income tax revenue, and what that's going to do to unemployment insurance expenditures.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? All right, wonderful. Not seeing any. Thank you so much, Anne, for your continued partnership. I know that it's been a bit of a whirlwind, and again, I cannot stress enough. Every week I say thank you so much to the folks on council that have been writing testimony, because I know how fast and furiously they come in. So thank you, Councilmember Westlake, Councilmember Landman, and Councilmember Dabala for your support as well. Thank you so much, Anne. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, we're going to move to public comments this evening. Do we have any public comments on voting items? Just as a reminder, voting items this evening: single reading ordinance approving the DHCA rental inspection contract, and a single reading ordinance authorizing the use of a state revitalization program, National Capital Strategic Economic Development, or NED grant award to preserve affordable housing at 7520 Maple Avenue. Not seeing any comments. Do we have any virtual public comments on voting items? Okay. Great. Okay, wonderful. Commenter on voting items? Mr. Sherwood? Hi, Wayne.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. Thank you for allowing me to speak before you tonight. My name is Wayne Sherwood and I live at 218 Grant Avenue in Ward 1. I urge you to act to preserve affordable housing in the city, especially along Maple Avenue, and to ensure that the residents have a strong and effective voice in the decision-making about these buildings, including how they are operated and what kinds of benefits the tenants receive. It is said that the economic development loan would enable Orlo to get additional financing, including from state and county sources as well as tax credits. The public should be well informed about this. This should not be regarded as just a private deal between the Resident Association and Orlo. Orlo agreed to take on this task on very short notice. The resident agreement was not made available at the council work session last week. As of noon today, it was not available at the City Council website either. An attachment to tonight's agenda gives only a brief summary of what the city says the signed final agreement includes. The city clerk, Jesse Carpenter, has recently replied to a FOIA request that I submitted. It includes the minutes of a resident association meeting with Orlo held on February 16th. Thank you to the city clerk. These meeting minutes included a draft of the elements in the resident agreement as proposed by Orlo then. However, I have still not seen a copy of the final agreement, which the city now says has been signed. How can the tenant association try to ensure that Orlo keeps the promises it made in the agreement? It seems to me that it would be difficult for the tenant association to act effectively if in the future it differs with Orlo about the interpretation of the agreement. The city said last week that the tenants could negotiate with Orlo or as a matter of last resort, take Orlo to court. It would take money, however, if the tenant association wants to hire its own legal counsel to help in such negotiations. Therefore, I request that the City Council adopt an amendment to the Economic Development Loan to provide an additional $30,000 out of the loan to go directly to the tenant association for potential legal costs that might be needed to implement the agreement, and that this money be placed in an account which the tenant association can access directly. This would not result in any additional cost to the city. The resident association would be able to draw upon those funds as needed to pay for its legal costs and could select its own legal counsel. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight.
Great, thank you very much. Do we have any other public comments on voting items? Great. We're going to move to general public comments. Do we have any general public comments this evening?
Okay, Michael. My name is Steve Whitney. I'm at 16 Preston Place in Ward 1. And I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Tacoma Stormwater Solutions, which is an ad hoc group of city residents who care deeply about the costs and effectiveness of stormwater management in our part of the county. Tonight, I offer a thank you and an invitation. First, TSS sincerely thanks the Department of Public Works for their meeting room in December that enabled city residents, staff, and council representatives to assist a University of Maryland research team in testing how virtual reality technology might assist the decision-making about threats of flooding. It's fair to say that most participants were struck by the vividness of virtual reality to convey the severity of stormwater risks, plus important details of potential damage. Over 2 days of testing, 21 volunteers spent an hour each comparing presentations of threat assessments at a flood-prone intersection in Baltimore City. The threats were shown in 3 formats: words and tables, 2D flat graphs, and 3D virtual reality. Thank you all, especially DPW and the Emergency Preparedness Manager, Mark McInerney, who attended, and also some three of the council representatives, Cindy Davala, Jessica Landman, and Roger Slagle, and other people in the city who took their time to attend. Second, I invite you to a TSS webinar on April the 17th at 7 p.m. with these university researchers who will also discuss the factors of data quality and completeness. Predictive modeling is based on estimations, so complete and accurate data are essential. Why does this research matter for Tacoma Park? The intersection in Baltimore is the low point of a stormwater catchment area. It's where the water in a rainstorm converges. If the catchment area were big enough, the intersection in question could ironically suffer terrible flooding without a single raindrop from the sky, because water runs downhill from the rest of the catchment area. This is why people recently died by inundation in Spanish towns near Valencia with almost no warning. The flooding comes from uphill, not from rising water downhill. Tacoma Park has such a low point. It's Maple Avenue, the stream valley here, also called Brashears Run, the site of our most densely populated and lowest income neighborhood. Paul Krastofsky, the chief scientific advisor of TSS, has circulated a paper comparing Maple Avenue to a bathtub, ready to fill if its drainage ever proves inadequate. Think about it. What happens if the concrete pipes under Maple Avenue get blocked by high water levels in Sligo Creek, where these pipes discharge? The TSS April 17th webinar will cover this and other reasons for hope. We believe Maple Avenue threat could be an excellent Kickstarter for general climate change management benefiting residents throughout the city. Strategic planning is essential. With this, flooding can be managed effectively and affordably through a hybrid of gray and green infrastructure measures. Look for our Zoom links to be announced in local email listservs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comments this evening?
Therese Gibson, Ward 3. At our recent neighborhood meeting, the city manager discussed conditions in the community center, including HVAC problems, mold, and sewage backups. Please share publicly the extent of these problems. I assume they may be caused by building in a floodplain, perhaps without adequate stormwater management. What are the future costs for floodproofing the building? What will it cost for further remediation of ongoing moisture issues? The Atrium project to build out lower-level police office space and scale upward to the third floor to possibly build meeting and storage rooms seems problematic in a structure compromised by water damage. What happens when all the weight of extra construction is added to the building? Nothing is shared about any costs beyond the anemic budget of $1.4 million scheduled for the 2026 budget. There is no current project page for this construction on the city website. When will we have information? No hard bid costs are made available, and yet the city wants to start on this project as soon as the library construction staging clears. I imagine that our current library construction company has assured the city it can fix all the water problems. Rather than taking the word of an entity with a vested interest in getting the business, we should instead contract with an independent engineering firm. Has the city recently hired a firm to undertake comprehensive modeling of the potential impact of an extreme rain event so that we can find out if it is advisable to construct in the atrium? If we don't have the appropriate baseline data, we seem to invite fiscal disaster in moving forward quickly with the Atrium project. It's unfortunate that the city is now towards the end of yet another round of permit approvals with Montgomery Planning. We should regroup to get the right information first. Residents are talking about the Atrium project, and thus far, I hear no support for it. Please do not move forward on it. The city has been burned by the cost of a $3.5 million library renovation in 2015, turning into a $20.7 million library community center complex. On another topic, I want to ask again that the city open the Department of Public Works facility for a public tour so that we can see exactly what the construction needs are there. I see that Senator Smith has put in for a $263,000 state grant for this project. The public needs more information. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
Second, pull up my notes here. So my name is Jacqueline Moore and I live in Ward 2, and I've got a two-part comment. So first, I hope given the current federal government situation and the intrusion of the unelected Elon Musk into our country's government, that the city will drop their X account. Why are we putting money into the pocket of the world's richest man, a man who would like nothing more than to punish a sanctuary city like Tacoma Park and its residents? I would ask you to give me 5 bullet points by close of business on Monday, March 3rd, explaining why the city of Tacoma Park thinks it's necessary to maintain its X account. X is home to all different sorts of hate speech, and it gives cover to those on its platform who choose to use hate speech. Does our city really want to be associated with this kind of behavior? On a different note, I've been asking Daryl Braithwaite for several months to remove some wood scraps on the public ADA compliant sidewalk at the corner of Aspen Avenue and Lincoln Avenue near the mailbox. The presence of the debris makes a farce of the sidewalk being ADA compliant. It's hard to navigate a sidewalk that's not kept clear and clean of debris. 3 weeks ago, Ms. Braithwaite pushed this over to Mr. Baravecchia of Code Enforcement. Nothing has happened, so here's the wood for you to dispose of as you see fit. It may or may not be pressure treated wood. I think at least one piece is. So if it is, it shouldn't just go into the regular trash. The pieces have many months worth of dog pee, spider egg sacs, and other fun things on it. The wood seemed to be part of a temporary sediment erosion control fence that was put in place after a tree was taken down at 403 Lincoln. Money is tight and the city needs to take care of what we have because there won't be money to fix or replace things that need fixing or replacing anytime soon. This little pile could have been easily retrieved by our hardworking waste removal teams as they go by on their weekly rounds, but they needed direction from above that this little job needed to be done. There's still some shrubbery that needs to be trimmed because it's partially blocking a speed limit sign near 328 and 330 Boyd Avenue. I brought this issue to the attention of Ms. Braithwaite and Ms. DeBala in fall of 2024 during a back and forth email exchange my neighbors started regarding the traffic on Lincoln Avenue. Again, let's take care of what we have. It's a fiscally responsible thing to do, and it's one of the many reasons why we have a city government. If these types of things can't be done, it's time to seriously consider turning the Department of Public Works over to Montgomery County. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments? Okay, great. Do we have any virtual general public comments this evening? Okay. Let's see if we could get Ms. Machui up.
Ms. Machui, can you hear us?
Ms. Machui? Mary Jane, can you hear us?
There it is. There
Yes,
it
we can
is.
hear you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm in Ward 2, 404 Boyd Avenue, and I've lived in Tacoma Park since before, probably about 1983. When I was married, we moved into a roach-infested apartment on Lee Avenue, which has since been renovated. I live in a small house now, which it's difficult to maintain. One of the few 2-bedroom houses in Tacoma Park probably left. And I would like to mention 2 things. One is national, and one is this about a particular area in Tacoma Park. The first one is I'm asking you about the boycott, called boycott on February 28th, this Friday. The NACP is asking everyone to please refrain from buying anything except for emergencies. And this is a response to the rollback of DEI by the federal government and some major companies such as Walmart, Meta, McDonald's, and Target. Thank you, please. Second of all, I'm sorry, this coupled with this threatened closure of the U.S. Department of Education will most probably make life particularly difficult for people with learning disabilities and other minorities, and the people who are most hurt by this legislation, including me and my son, and people and parents of special needs adults. Going to center on Tacoma Park. Today I ate at Mansa Kunda restaurant, a beautiful place to eat at. And the two brothers who went it are really, really great, and they work hard. It takes you have to sit there a while because it looks like one or two people running the show, but it's worth it. Anyways, after speaking with Hati, it seems like there were a lot of their parking spaces have been taken over by the newer restaurant on that strip. And why is they allowed to take all most of their parking spaces? They've been here longer, and they're well respected, and a really good restaurant, Black owned. Why are the newer restaurant allowed to take over most of their parking spaces? It's very difficult. I took the bus there, so I didn't have to worry about parking. But it's a very big problem there for people who have cars. And I just want to say the lady who was just before me is a neighbor. I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but you mentioned an evergreens blocking vegetation blocking 300 block of Boyd Avenue. It's been for years. I think it's maybe it's an evergreen blocking part of the street even. And you can't even, not walking, forget about walking. There's no walking space. It's also blocking the street. And I told Dale Braithwaite about it years ago, and nothing has been done about it. And it's getting worse because it's getting bigger and bigger. It's taller than me. I guess it's about 6 foot tall. Why is that allowed to block the street? Thank you very much.
Thank
and
you,
all
Ms.
have a
Machui.
good evening.
You too. Thank you, Ms. Machui.
Thanks.
Okay, we're gonna move to council comments. Do we have any council comments this evening? Council comments? Councilmember Schlegel.
Someone else? I don't think I'll have time to respond to all of the great public comments tonight, but I do appreciate them, and I wanted to, I had read Wayne Sherwood's comment, and I think your emphasis on all residents, including the council, seeing the tenants agreement with Warlow is very much appreciated, and we do have the development agreement in our hands right now. And I do think it's important that tenants would be in a position to seek legal recourse if it was an alleged violation of the agreement. I'm encouraged by our housing and community development staff's attention to such matters. The city would take a strong role in any issues like that. I did appreciate seeing the visualizations that you, Steve Whitney, mentioned, and it does make sense to be concerned about Lower Maple Avenue, particularly if a few large trees came down and blocked the creek catastrophically during a major event. So thank you for calling that to our attention. Ms. Gibson, I along with other council members I know, I'm looking closely into the situations downstairs in this building. And my understanding from a discussion this week was that the water and mold issues have been confined to areas like the bathroom, and are not related to flooding or groundwater seepage from outside. So that was one thing that was reassuring to find out. I'll move on just to say thank you to everybody else who commented. I wanted to emphasize tonight that I'm appreciative to the staff who have been providing us with briefings about their departments. Very informative, great back and forth question and answer, and I'm just learning so much. I wanted to say to my colleagues this evening briefly that I am strongly interested in fiscal prudence this year. I am alarmed by what we're hearing from the state, and I'm also, of course, hearing from residents who are concerned about long-term patterns. I do not say that at all because I want to threaten our values as a city. I really want to stand up for our values, which are most important to me: diversity and protecting our most vulnerable. But I do think that we not only need to look this year at fiscal prudence in terms of cuts and efficiencies, but really take a step back, start to take a step back this year to look at structurally our mix of county and city services. And so I will be urging us to not be afraid to do that. Arguably, it's just something that we've never done since we unified under one county back in the 90s. So I hope we can take a close look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schlegel. Do we have any other council comments? Councilmember DeBala.
Yeah, hi, thank you. A couple of things. To the comment that Jacqueline Ward made, I did find the email. There was a response from Public Works that they were going to go look. So I would appreciate following up as to whether that is public or private and what happened. Whether it got trimmed and it grew back, or whether just whatever the response is, I'll write that down and send it to you. As I guess I had thought it had been handled. Thank you. I had two things I was going to bring up related to county actions county discussions that are going on in the next couple weeks for residents, in case you're interested. So one is a proposal to expand the eligibilities for the county's low-income tax credit for property taxes. There's a hearing coming up on March 4th. I have the bill. Anybody who's interested can get a hold of me. I don't know how to do this any quicker. Secondly, there is a countywide proposal to expand workforce housing along major corridors. In the county, there are a handful of properties in wards 2 and 6 that are on New Hampshire Avenue that are affected. And so if you live on New Hampshire Avenue in a single family home, either get a hold of me or Amy and we'll give you the whole story. It's and how you can comment. And thank you to the staff for providing me with that information earlier today, because I couldn't find it. So those are the two things I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Councilmember Landman, so I can turn my neck that way.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to thank my constituent from Ward 1, Steve Whitney, for your comments on stormwater. It was a fascinating thing to participate in the virtual reality test, and I appreciate having the opportunity to do that, and DPW sharing their conference room with us for it. And I'd like to respond to Wayne Sherwood's comment about setting aside money in the agreement with respect to the NED grant, which we're going to be voting on today. So I want to say this now. I do agree with Councilmember Schlegel that it's good to be very vigilant and protect the interests of the residents of the building, but I would not want to set aside a legal fund which presupposes a sort of bad faith need to potentially involve themselves in litigation with the developer. I would support the city making clear that it will take a strong position as an intervener or as an amicus curiae if need be in litigation if it comes to that. But I think that the additional authority or the additional leverage that we'll have as holders of a loan as the city is an appropriate way to exercise that kind of influence. And I don't think setting aside money for it at this time is the right way to go. Let me say also that, as Councilmember Schlegel said, and as we heard from Ann in Annapolis today, our legislative advisor, these are incredibly difficult times we're going to be facing. And of course, we want fiscal prudence in our budgeting, but I think it's wise for us to think in terms of having some kind of a plan B strategy in mind in the budgetary season, especially as we look to how many grants and outside funding sources we have that are either county or state related. We know the county budget is going to suffer downstream effects from the state budget, and the state budget is going to suffer massive downstream effects from what's going on in the federal government, to say nothing of our own weakening tax base and housing values, which affects our revenues directly. So I know that's not very cheerful, but it feels like the realistic thing to do this year, regardless of how one feels the affection and love we have for the programs that we have. But we need a plan B so that we're not caught short-funded even worse than we fear. And finally, just let me say, I'm having a council member coffee this weekend on Saturday from 10:30 to 12 in the Student Center, the Nunley Student Center at Montgomery College. All of Ward 1 is invited, especially people who live in North Tacoma near the college. We can take a look around afterwards and see the food forest sites on the college campus and talk about whatever's on your mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Landman. Councilmember Hanzak?
Thank you. Thank you to everybody who came out to comment tonight. Just a few notes. I won't be able to make it through everybody. Mr. Whitney, I think if you said April 17th, I just wanted to note to you that's spring break for all the MCPS schools, and there may be a lot of people out of town. So just to be mindful of that. It may not be your target audience usually, but a lot of people are going to be impacted. Ms. Moore, I think I wanted to share with you that as a person who I think you have seen expressed frustrations in my early days as a council member with code enforcement issues and things such as bushes overgrowing on sidewalks. I want to say, and other things that are blocking sidewalks or trash or whatever that might that the city might either enforce the code or Public Works might take a stop there. I see a lot of things like this in Ward 5, and unfortunately, I feel often like I'm one of the only people that ever reports these things. And I am only one person. And I'm saying that to you because it sometimes, I'll be honest with you, it hits me hard that I know there are people that care, just like you care this much, to make that phone call. And I wish we had a bunch of those voices calling for on behalf of the Ward 5 area, where we have a lot of pedestrians also who really need to get by and don't even have cars to make another choice. So I guess sometimes I feel concerned that when we press Public Works too hard, I can see how hard they work. I get immediate responses for two years and coming from Public Works every single time I write about anything. And I'm pretty sure that holds true for a lot of my colleagues. So I guess I just wanted to share that with you. I feel like in a perfect world, it would be great if we had a transparent list, of everything that's come in, so we could kind of get a sense of the distribution, and then whether that's really getting, whether they're able to do that proactive enforcement that I would like to see from our code enforcement and our Public Works along our ADA sidewalks. And, I welcome our Public Works Director, our code enforcement, to give us feedback on kind of what's a way to give them the space they need to get those things done, knowing that things are going to get overlooked here and there. I'm not making excuses for them. I just think it's a tricky business. I see long extensions of sidewalk that need trimming, honestly. And I'm not throwing the Public Works Department or code enforcement under the bus. There's just a lot to get to. And then Ms. Machui, thank you for coming to and eating at Monsecunda in Ward 5. I have spoken with the owner of Monsecunda many times about parking spaces and the challenges therein. There aren't that many parking spaces. I have worked with him when he would like me to on the parking spaces issues, and unfortunately there aren't a lot of mechanisms to do that. If I can take another minute or so, thank you. I want to send a thank you also to Meals on Wheels this week. I had a few residents that I was deeply concerned about. I really wasn't sure how to navigate. We don't have a social services arm on our staff. And they proactively went out and checked on a couple of my clients who had already given information about Meals on Wheels, and they signed up. And it was just such a great partnership with the city that we're able to give those grants out to Meals on Wheels, and they're able to help make sure that we're getting the wraparound services that people need. I also enjoyed attending a Washington Adventist University Business Entrepreneur event today that was open to the community. It was really, really eye-opening and beautiful to see all these young people in our community eager to be involved and engaged in our community in different ways, and to make linkages with our local business associations. And I would urge us to consider them and our Montgomery College students as resources. And then one more thing is related to several of us attended an MML event this week, and I won't get into the details in case anybody else is going to, such as the mayor. But one of the issues we talked about was immigration, and And I learned this week that the test center, which is a county resource center located at 8703 Flower in the complex, just on the northern tip of the city, there they have people who speak Amharic, Spanish, and English, and they can provide a whole array of connectivity to social services. But namely, right now, if people have a need, on the first and third Wednesday of every month at 6 o'clock, people can come in, walk in, and get legal services, including immigration issues. So please, yes, so I'll repeat that. First and third Wednesday of the month at 6 p.m. If you get there between 6 and 6:30, you can sign in, and then they'll be there to give those services to the people who showed up then until about 9. So that seems pretty amazing. And I haven't heard about that kind of thing where you can just walk in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hunzak. Councilmember Westlake.
Hi, thank you. I just have one brief, I wanted to just make sure folks know, I'm going to have an online town hall for my residents this coming Monday evening. I think last week said Tuesday, but realized I had a conflict. So it'll be Monday at 7:30 on Google Meet. If you email me, I can make sure you have the link. My email is amyw@comaparkmd.gov. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. Councilmember DeBala.
And I forgot to say that on next Thursday, I'll have the first of a series of Ward 2 budget meetings, again virtually. Thank you for reminding me to set it up and to bring it up tonight. Thank you.
All right, any other council comments? And I will proceed into my comments for this evening. Yes.
I forgot to mention on Saturday, I'll also have office hours. I'll be
Because
at
it's like
BY Morrison at 9:30 and then at Spring Park around 10:30.
Bank it on the spring, are we, huh? That's great.
All right. All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming out and providing comments. I really appreciate every opportunity that we have to hear from our residents. One of the things that I will say in response to the question regarding the Atrium project and the work that was done, if I could just have our city management, we went through the process of revamping our website, and there's sometimes where some historical information is kind of moved in different places. And if we could just follow up with our staff about information that was for the Atrium project. For those council members that were not on council during that time, the council received, and I believe that information has been shared with members of council, the council meeting in which there was a full walkthrough of the Atrium project and design work and also estimates. So I do think it's important for us to just make sure that those types of materials are, especially those things that currently relate to things that we're talking about, are easily available for folks. The other component, I do want to thank my colleagues and also colleagues across Montgomery County, municipal leaders from across Montgomery County who attended the Maryland Municipal League meeting that was held last Thursday, where we went through our tax duplication numbers. And I will say that, the city of Takoma Park, we went up just a little bit this year in terms of our tax dupe estimates. So there's been a lot of work that's been happening behind the scenes with city staff and myself and OMB from the county to make sure that those numbers accurately reflect the monies that are due to us. So we are appreciative of the fact that we've been able to work in partnership to make sure that our tax duplication estimates are accurate. Montgomery County also shared a lot of what they're doing in terms of immigration support, as Councilmember Honzak mentioned, but also the resources that they're making available for federal employees. It is really, 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 it's a very difficult time for those of us that are federal employees. Having received an email about listing the 5 things that you've done that it's even in joking, it's a very triggering statement for me, because there is nothing like being harassed in the workplace. And to see your coworkers, your colleagues having to say goodbye with less than a week's notice has been a very, very difficult thing for federal workers to endure. So we are working on also making sure that there is some clarity on our website about resources that may be available to federal workers within the community. One of the things that I do want to stress for federal workers, which was highlighted during the MML meeting on Thursday, is that you have to apply for unemployment insurance in the area in which you work, right? Not where you live. So we may have a lot of federal workers who actually work in DC, or they work in Virginia, or they work in Maryland. So it's important for folks to understand that if you are applying for unemployment benefits, that it is related to your official duty station that is noted on your SF-50. So we are doing what we can within the city to try to make sure that we're providing resources and being able to kind of provide a little bit of connection for folks that are in search of information about resources that may be available to them. Coming up this week, so I want to thank Council Member Schlegel, the Chief of Police. There will be a safety meeting tomorrow at Victory Towers. So looking forward to participating in that. Council Member Wesselek and I will be participating at the grand opening of the Tacoma Langley One Stop. That will be happening on Saturday. So we're looking forward to that. And then there's also the Tacoma Park Middle School book fair that's on Saturday. And I am going to be auctioned, lunch with me, I think. So I am looking forward to supporting that effort, and I hope to see you all there as well. So with that, I will turn things over to our city manager, Mr. DeSpirito, to go through city manager comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of council and guests. From the police department, the Tacoma Park Police Department would like to include youth members in the Chief's Advisory Board to bring fresh perspectives and amplify the voices of young residents in the community. The Chief's Advisory Board serves as bridge between the police department and the public, providing a forum to discuss community concerns, public safety initiatives, and department policies. By inviting young people to join, the department hopes to foster meaningful dialogue, gain insight into the issues affecting youth, and strengthen trust between officers and the next generation. Young adults with a passion for community service and public safety are encouraged to apply. Youth members will have the opportunity to work alongside city leaders, share their experiences, and help shape initiatives that impact them and their peers. The board has hybrid meetings on the third Monday of each month at 7 p.m. For information about the board and its current members, please visit our police website at www.tacomaparkmd.gov. If you're between the ages of 16 and 21 and interested in joining the Chiefs Advisory Board, please submit a letter of interest to Kathy Plevy at kathyp@tacomaparkmd.gov or mail it to Chief Antonio Duvall, 7500 Maple Avenue, Tacoma Park, Maryland, 20912. All applicants will have the opportunity to interview with the Chief of Police and a current board member as part of the selection process. Tacoma Park Police Department's policy directives require investigations of all complaints against the department or its employees, with the annual statistical summaries of such investigations by the Internal Affairs Function made available to the public. You can find this entire report on the police website. It has also been emailed and posted on Police X, formerly Twitter, and Facebook social media pages. The Tacoma Park Police Department will host a second Tile Mate air tag giveaway event this spring. Date and time to be announced. As part of their ongoing commitment to community safety, we will distribute free TileMate tracking tags to residents of Tacoma Park. These devices can be placed in vehicles to assist residents in locating their vehicles in the event of a theft. All information can be found on the police website. From the Housing and Community Development Department, Eastern Standard Time will blast off with their funky rhythms in a lively boundary-busting show, blending soul, funk, jazz, reggae, and ska in a Caribbean beat hot pot. Follow that? The performance will begin at 7:30 p.m. at the Community Center on March 7th, 2025. It's free. From the library, the Friends of the Tacoma Park, Maryland Library are holding a fundraiser at the VFW this Saturday evening, starting at 7 p.m. There will be music by the Magmatics, a raffle, and pizza with drinks available for purchase from the bar. Funds from the Friends support the library's programs, including Spanish Circle Time, family chess instruction, the Fix-It Clinic, the annual Dia de los Libros celebration, and the Friends Book Clubs. Join us for a good cause and a fun evening. The library wants to publicly welcome our new part-time youth services librarian, Anna Reheda. She recently finished a Master of Library Science program at Simmons University and is a longtime Tacoma Park resident. We are excited to have Anna on board. This spring, the library is partnering with the University of Maryland Student Association to offer MedUcate, a workshop series for school-aged youth. The first session is Healthy Eating, Nutrition Essentials, and that will be held on Saturday, March 29th at 1 p.m. We will also offer sessions on debunking nutrition myths and how the brain functions when we read. Join Youth Services Librarian Dave Burbank for a new monthly program called Alternative Games. Designers will debut games for playtesting. We will have Dungeons and Dragons and similar role-playing games. We will roll out a cart full of tabletop games for folks to play and enjoy. The next session of Alternative Games will be held on Sunday, March 30th from 3 to 5 p.m. Finally, from the City Manager's office, a shout out from the Recreation Department. The City of Tacoma Park was well represented at the ActiveNet Regional User Conference last week. ActiveNet is our facility and program registration management software. Chelsea Nunez, our school-age programs manager, Danielle Murphy, our office manager, attended this conference and prepared with a list of questions specific to Tacoma Park and have returned with answers that will help smooth our registration process and procedures. We look forward to implementing what they have learned, and we know that it will make the process easier for our community members. That concludes my report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move to tonight's presentation. The Department of Housing and Community Affairs, DCHA Rental Inspection Program.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. Deb McNally here with the Department of Housing and Community Development, and there we go. There we go. Sorry about that. I'm here today as the former housing manager. We have a very close relationship with the county's Department of Housing and Community Affairs. We have nearly 3,200 rental units in the city of Tacoma Park, and our contracts with the county's DHCA is how we manage to every year for most of them make sure we inspect them to ensure that they are safe, habitable places for our renters in the city of Tacoma Park. So I am delighted to be joined here today with Tamala Robinson, who is the Code Enforcement Manager for Montgomery County, and Rudy Castro, who is the Supervisor for the Down County Tacoma Park area. So I will turn it over to them to talk about their work.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. We're delighted to be here today. Rudy Castro manages our Tacoma Park team, who does all of the rental housing inspections for Tacoma Park. So he has put together this presentation to kind of give you some understanding of the work that we do. So I'll introduce.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Tamla. My name is Rudy Castro. I'm one of the field supervisors overseeing the Lower County and also Tacoma Park team. So here tonight, I have a quick presentation just to give you a brief overview of what we do from the county side here within the city of Tacoma Park. So who we are, again, we're 6 members of Department of Housing and Community Affairs, 5 inspectors, and 1 supervisor, which is me, overseeing the daily operations, inspections, and services that we provide to Montgomery County and as well as the city here in Tacoma Park. So our mission and goal is, our mission is to enhance the quality of life for the residents of Montgomery County and also Tacoma Park by actively ensuring that our neighborhoods are safely, welcoming, and vibrant. We are committed to maintaining and improving our housing stock, ensuring that all homes meet housing standards of safety and livability. Through community engagement, regular maintenance initiatives, and partnerships with local organizations, we strive to create well-kept public spaces and supportive environments that foster a sense of belonging and pride among residents. And how we are working towards achieving our mission, our housing code inspectors, even though we're going through tough times, we perform mandated inspections, of course, of rental properties within the city of Tacoma Park. We investigate potential code violations reported by tenants or by any residents of the city of Tacoma Park within the rental properties. Unregistered rental properties found during initial investigations are reported to the city for proper registration as well. Our goal is to educate renters and property owners about their rights and responsibilities regarding property maintenance as per the following chapters that you see here before you of Montgomery County codes and of course City of Tacoma Park ordinances. Chapter 26, housing and building maintenance. 22, 96, smoke detectors. 48, solid waste. 49, snow removal. 58, weeds. 29, 22, inspection of rental housing, and 6.12, property maintenance codes. And of course, our goal is to ensure that we are abiding by the agreement from Tacoma Park, the city of Tacoma Park with the county, complete mandated inspections in a timely manner, respond to service requests within a reasonable time frame or immediately if considered an emergency, provide monthly reports, and have an open line of communication, of course, with city officials. So our role here in the city of Tacoma Park, from as far as the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, the code enforcement, we work together to ensure, again, our housing stock is safe and maintained in good condition. We perform, and we do that, we complete that by performing regular property maintenance, license inspections of annual and biannual at 100% of all rental facilities located in the city of Tacoma Park. Under the authority, of course, of Tacoma Park Code, Title 6, Chapter 6.12 of property maintenance, and Chapter 26, housing and building maintenance for Department of Housing. We perform pre-rental license inspections for new rental housing properties. performing inspections for all complaints received on rental housing, and enforcement actions to include violation notices and/or citations. The frequency and type of inspections, of course, multifamily and single-family rental properties, condos, annual, biannual inspections, new rental properties, and as needed to investigate complaints and any concerns that come in with 301, the call center of the Montgomery County. As for the requirements under the Tacoma Park contract, inspections of rental properties are mandatory and for 100% of all units. And these are just some quick pictures of some of the common violations that we usually see while our inspectors are out there doing completing these inspections. Of course, some exterior violations as far as tall grass, solid waste, unregistered vehicles. And interior, we run across everything from peeling paint to water damages, lack of egress, or any other safety hazardous conditions that we encounter during these inspections. These are just some of the results. We've inspected over 1,900 units for the year 2024. The number of cases that were created were 319. 226 of those were mandatory inspections, and 93 of those were complaint-based. The number of violations cited for that year was 4,340. 4,080 were for mandatory inspections, and 260 were for complaint-based. The number of citations we issued last year was around 142. The number of closed cases were 198, 110 from mandatory inspections, and 88 from complaints. And of course, we can't do this all on our own, of course, so we partner up with different agencies across the county, from police to fire rescue, the Department of Environmental Resources, and Department of Permitting Services as well. And that's all I have for you guys tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this presentation and for coming out tonight. We really, really appreciate it. Are there any questions? If not, I can lead us off. Councilmember DeBala.
Yeah, I have two questions. One, thank you for being here. It's great to see faces. One is about the numbers, and the other is a more general question about the history over the past few years. So you've got 4,340 violations cited. And 198 cases closed. So that's not 3,000 and some odd open violations. So could you translate what happened to the 4,000 plus violations? How many of them got taken care of, right, within a short period of time? All of them, some of them, none of them?
But sure. So majority of them are corrected almost immediately. So that number that I presented was mainly just the open violations that are still pending compliance.
The 142.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay.
But the majority of them are already in compliance. So, and we're focused on the ones that haven't complied.
Thank you. The other is a more general question, and perhaps the mayor was going to bring this up. In past years, we've discussed issues about the implementation of the program consistently across different buildings, and I want to know what you think. How are things going now?
We're slowly making progress. It's
That's fair.
Yeah, it's a little difficult, but yeah, we are moving forward. I think at this point, majority of these property owners understand what we're there for. So they know that we mean business.
That's progress.
Yes. So I think majority of them know already what's expected of them. So unless it's a new homeowner or property owner that does not know, the system very well, but that's what we usually do is try to educate the new homeowners to make sure that they are in compliance with county codes and city ordinances.
Okay. Director McNally, do you have anything to add to the progress here on over the past few years?
Yeah. So, as you know, during the COVID-19 pandemic, the county and the city stopped all code enforcement cases.
Yes.
And that was about a 2-year pause. And that also coincided with the housing department going down to one person. It's usually a team of 4. And so there was a lot of backlog in cases not being sent over to the county, in the rental licensing system not necessarily being fully staffed. And that is kind of being taken care of. I really want to point out the great work our housing program specialist, Jessica Troop, is doing, taking the reins on the implementation of a new rental licensing system that is really helping us track that and get these cases over to code enforcement much easier. So I would say there's been a lot of progress, and a lot of it is kind of bringing everything back up to the pre-pandemic kind of normal business.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Schlegel.
Thank you for this. Thank you for that presentation, Mr. Castro. And I wanted to mention that in our briefing, we heard about your responsiveness on the weekends at night, and that's very impressive to me. I just had 2 simple questions. One is, how does the frequency of our inspections in Tacoma Park differ from what properties are getting in Montgomery County? Is it triennial that they are generally inspected, or does it vary depending on the ordinance?
So the frequency in Montgomery County for so one thing we don't do in Montgomery County that you do in Tacoma Park is pre-inspections for rental properties. However, with our troubled property law, we have frequencies depending on where they're designated. So if they're designated at troubled, then our inspectors will inspect 100% annually every year of that property. We're changing the regulations now. They're actually up for comment because the at-risk properties are also in that category where we're doing them more frequently and at a higher percentage, either 50% or 100, depending on the complaints we get. So in addition to the Tacoma Park team, we are housed with 36 inspectors now. So I have 4 program managers that handle the other portions of the county.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so, but all of ours, it says annually and biennially. What does the biennial refer to for Tacoma Park?
I'll take that question. So it refers to the length of the rental license. So our rental licensing program has 3 technical components. One is a temporary license that has very specific rules around it that we would look at changing because frankly it doesn't make a lot of sense as currently written, and so we don't issue those. The other 2 are annual and biannual. The only way to get a biannual inspection is for the entire rental facility to have 5 or fewer minor violations. And what we categorize as a minor violation is nothing that is a health and safety risk or something that is an immediate kind of need for habitability purposes. So as you can imagine, most of our multifamily buildings, there's always 5 items that need some touch up, whether it's peeling paint, cracks, that sort of thing. Really, it's mostly our single family rentals that are on those biannual licenses.
Thank you. Would there be any sort of estimate of how many of our units are getting biennial inspections because they've been doing so well, performing so well?
So I'm hesitant to say an exact number. We can pull that number and get it back to you.
Thank you.
Generally speaking, it's our single family properties.
And the only other question was where a resident had asked, where are the records of the inspections held? Physically, I guess, or electronically.
So Montgomery County has a e-property portal that's open to the public. Anyone can go on and search an address to determine where that property lies, and it'll give you every violation that was cited for that particular property.
Great.
And we can send the link if you'd like it.
Thank you. Yes, if you could, I think that'd be great to share with residents.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Schlegel. Councilmember Hanzak.
I wonder, you actually already touched on it, troubled properties. I am still, after a couple years, newer to learning about how our housing policies work, and went to a rental housing seminar and learned about the troubled properties law in the county, and we don't have that. And this may be a question both for you or for our housing manager, but I guess I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more on the differences between what we've got going here and what's happening in the county with the troubled housing policy, and how you see some of the differences playing out as you go about your inspections. Like, I don't know if I fully understood your response to Mr. Schlegel regarding the, whether it's more frequent in the county because of the troubled properties or more comprehensive. If you could just
So you're
talk me
already
through that a little bit.
doing 100% of your typical
Annually.
multifamily properties. And what the troubled property does is gives us a better time, more frequent inspections, where typically we would only do, before the troubled properties, we would do inspections on a triannual basis, so every 3 years.
In the
This
county.
gave us a better look at the properties to determine whether or not we're seeing the same violations, if they're meeting that category, which is severity scores, and total violations per unit. And if they've ranged in that, troubled range, then we go back every year. Before, we did every 3 years. So we go back every year and we do 100%. And
I'm sorry, just can I interrupt you just so can I understand and follow your thinking? You're talking about in the county and not here in the city, because in the city you're already doing 100% of all of our units in every building. Is that what you mean by 100%?
Typically, we do
Okay.
100% all, yes.
Okay. So actually ours is more comprehensive and more frequent. Is that a fair thing to say too?
Yes, yours is
Okay.
more frequent. Well, with ours now, they become more frequent. If you're not troubled, if you're not designated troubled, then you may be at risk. Like you're on the verge of becoming trouble, then we do more frequent inspections, and that was what I was.
But that's in the county and not here. So what happens here when we see, okay, and you would do them just as frequently as you might do in the county, or more frequently because you're already inspecting us annually? Okay, I just wanted to make sure I very, very clearly understood that, because I do see, I'm in a part of the city where we have a lot of what I would categorize as troubled properties, and it's been a little unclear to me how to escalate some of these situations and help them move along the path a little bit more quickly to getting those things to become compliant. Yeah, I see Mr. McNally's behind you.
Yeah. So one of the things that the troubled properties designation has in the county that we don't have is some requirements about reporting out on kind of maintenance plans and that sort of thing. We've started talking with the county on how we might be able to get, become part of that program and work together on that. Those are early discussions at the moment, because it is something that we would have to work with the county on.
When you say reporting out, that's as different than the reports that you just mentioned were available publicly?
Correct. So I'll let Pamela speak to kind of how that piece works, but my understanding is that they have to report out any maintenance logs that they have, as well as their plans for renovation or any sort of ongoing maintenance.
Could you remain for just 1 second? And so do we here in the city, do we stop the ability of the landlord to raise their rents when a certain number of violations have not been repaired in a timely way? Because it was my understanding that that was part of the troubled properties policy. And again, I'm not sure who that question is for.
So the answer is we don't have a law in the books that does that.
I see. But the county does in relation to troubled properties.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that clarity.
So one of the things that I did find was a little surprising is the number of complaints versus the mandatory inspections. And I think one of the things that I know Councilmember Hanzak has been really pushing, particularly for our larger multifamily buildings, is the reporting of issues within within the buildings. So are you all seeing any sort of increases in terms of the numbers of complaints? Because we know that there's been some residents are concerned about retaliation, and so they don't necessarily report. Are you all seeing any growth in complaint reporting in the city of Tacoma Park?
No, not really, ma'am. Yeah, just like you mentioned, it's very difficult sometimes for residents to open up and report something because they know that there'll be retaliation, consequences. So we usually hear it from Devon if they come in and report something to the city. And just very few know that they need to report any issues in their homes with the county, with 311, for us to respond.
And you can also let your residents know that, they can remain anonymous. I know it's harder when they're living in an apartment and they get a complaint there, but they can always remain anonymous because under Chapter 26, it basically says you don't have to, we don't reveal the identity or who that complaint came from. So sometimes it's better for them to understand that if they want to remain anonymous, they can always do so.
Okay. Thank you for that.
I just want to jump in also and say that, and I'll always keep repeating this, is that one of the things is if they do put in a complaint, that is recorded. It's in the county's database, and so that can be used as a defense against any sort of eviction process. Typically, it's about 6 months afterwards. There's that period where that will be taken and factored into consideration. So it is helpful sometimes to have that good faith complaint in the record.
Okay, thank you for that.
Madam Mayor, can I ask a follow-up
Sure.
question on that? This is for you, Devin, or perhaps one of your colleagues. If a person wants to file a complaint anonymously, but have it on the record in the event that there is retaliation anyway, is that something that can be done as well?
I'm thinking about, I can start. So the county has an online complaint form, and that has information. I don't believe you have to put your name in there, and you can submit the complaint, but then there will also be kind of a receipt of the service request that you can keep for your own records. So that's a way that typically I will say, you can call 311 and that works. But if you are computer savvy, I always recommend, using the internet portal.
Councilmember Schlegel.
Following on once more of that, because this is just so important to feel that our residents feel safe to report violations. Let's say I live in apartment 412 and I have a problem in 412. Is there a way that I could say, I want to report a problem on the 4th floor and leave it at that? There's a leak in the ceiling on the 4th floor, but I'm afraid to say anything more than that. Would inspectors be able to then just follow up with a check of the hallway, or do I have to out myself as being in 412?
You don't have to. Yes. If you say the 4th floor, I want to remain anonymous. What you can always say is, I don't want them to know that I complained. I live in 412. I want to show you some things.
Mm-hmm.
The inspector won't do it. And we can take that 4th floor and go through, we're searching for the cause of the leak and be able to identify it that way. So most definitely.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. And so one other question that I have, and kind of also piggybacking off of Councilmember Hanzak's question, because now I'm intrigued about what what we have in the city as it relates to the inspection and how the troubled properties are defined for the purpose of the county, which is very different because we are, for the most part, reviewing everyone annually, for the most part, the multifamily ones, which is usually where we tend to get the most complaints. But one question I have is about, do we look at some of our larger multifamily buildings from the perspective of the proportion of units or outstanding complaints within that entire building? So let's say I have building X that has 100 units. It currently has 100 complaints that are unresolved, right? kind of going back to the point of if we're starting to think through some of our policies in that regard and whether or not there's some, you know, a little bit of a stick that we may want to develop. I was just wondering, like, do we look at our properties from that lens, keeping in mind that we know that there's these annual inspections that happen? So for us, it would likely be more based on the volume of complaints.
We can. If we do see an influx of complaints coming in from a particular property, then, you know, we'll reach out to Devin and say, there's something happening. Knowing that we're going to be there to inspect it sooner, we'll address those complaints immediately. But it's something that I can go back and look and see, like, what properties are that, if you'd like that data.
That would be helpful. And I haven't looked at the database in a while, but I do recall, like, you could actually go online and actually see the numbers per the address, which can kind of give you a window into, like, which buildings and how many were there. Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. Any other questions? Councilmember Honzak?
Sorry, I'm gonna ask one more. I'm curious, as inspectors, if you might just share with us a few things that you find are the most powerful tools at your disposal, whether they are direct or indirect, that compel some of the multifamily building owners to make repairs, besides just saying, this is a problem. Do you have any thoughts on that for us? I'm just, you're one of the few people that go deep and wide across our city and really get to see what's going on, and you see all different kinds of personalities as you do so. But do you feel like there are certain things you wish that there was more of or less of, or something related to that? Just a few thoughts if you have any.
So as far as obtaining compliance, I think
Yeah,
the word,
obtaining compliance, or just having somebody be even
Sure.
more proactive than
right. So
just
I think
being
the
compliant.
word citation, when it comes to mind, or
What did you say about
discussion, citation?
just
citations,
having
yeah.
citations?
So once we mention citations, then that kind of seems to turn everything around, and we obtain compliance or any type of legal action that we will take against the property, then we see a turnover, and compliance becomes automatic for some reason. We try to work with the landlords as much as we can, but we also have a time frame that we need to meet those standards, or have those repairs made. So again, once we mention any legal actions, then they tend to move a little faster. But our inspectors they do their best to make sure that they get these complaints resolved as soon as possible. Sometimes we get some tenants that do not cooperate all the time, but we also try to work with the tenants and try to make them aware of what the situation is inside their unit. So we try to obtain compliance that way as well.
I will share, I know you haven't answered yet, but I ask this from a place of having seen in some of our buildings with some of our more challenging landlords, in some of our more challenging buildings with challenging tenants as well, that sometimes compliance is very difficult to achieve. And the last, my observation is the last line that we have as a city, or you as enforcers, is to say, okay, this building, is just going to have to stop being rented. But yet none of us really want to do that, because a lot of these people are really down and out and need their housing. So do you ever see a situation, and I've also learned that some of the folks that I have the most challenges with in my neighborhood with multifamilies are those who have owned their properties the longest, and so they paid the least for their property. So when you talk about compliance, I've seen some folks who've been taken to court. They've got other issues going on, and it's still the things drag on. Do you think there's an issue of fines not being high enough at times, or can you imagine a scenario in which that could make a meaningful difference? Is there anything else that we might employ that could help us, particularly with the kind of landlords that I'm describing? There are some great landlords, to be clear, but there are some who are really, really difficult. And I feel, and they're also, incidentally, the buildings in which I see the fewest people complaining because they're so scared of retaliation. And I know that's going to get a whole lot worse right now with the number of immigrants in my community and our whole community.
So you speak of fines. They say just passed, a law where they increase the fines. We can adopt them through the
bring the
county.
mic
Through
down?
the county, we can adopt the increase in fines. So right now for a Class A fine, it's $500, but it can go up to $2,000. The county is writing something up. I'm not sure that always would work. If it's severe conditions, then we have the opportunity to issue citations on a daily basis, and I think that gets their attention when we start doing that, right? Where we say, okay, we're going to issue you a citation for each unit every day until you correct the violations. That gets their attention a little more than just saying it's a $500 fine, because then we have to go to court, and a lot of times when we get to court, which could be 3 to 6 months later, we don't get that fine that we issued the citation for. So, but a lot of landlords are starting to comply on the county side, especially with the rent stabilization. They can't raise their rent if they're troubled at risk. We're starting to see properties start to comply because it affects them by not being able to raise their rent. So that's a big step towards having landlords comply with what we what we ask them to do in the first place.
And I'm sorry, Mayor, just one more follow-up. And so are you able to do that here? You're saying that's sort of a subjective tool that you can use. You can add on a daily fine if you wanted to. Are you able to do that in the city of Tacoma as well?
We are.
Oh, okay.
Based on Chapter 26, we could issue
Up to what?
based on Chapter 26 of
Okay.
the Montgomery County Code.
Thank you.
Under the severe conditions, we can do that.
Councilmember Honzak, are you done?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Councilmember Lamb.
Your presentation is raising so many interesting additional questions. So we have heard from our code enforcement people that are doing not the inspections of houses, but others, that they use a sort of a courtesy notice followed by a citation. They don't begin with a citation. I'm curious whether that is part of your procedure as well or not, and if you have any comments on that, if it is, and then I have a follow-up question.
Sure. So we issue a notice of violation first. And that's basically saying, just putting them on notice that you're in violation of this particular code. And we give them time to comply. And if they don't, then we move to citations. So there is a notice. We don't necessarily have to issue that notice of violation if it's that severe, or if it's a repeat offender, we can issue a citation right off the bat.
Okay, that's logical.
Yeah.
There is legislation pending in the legislature to enable municipalities and counties to raise their maximum fine from, I think, 1,000 to 5,000. Is that something that you would think would be helpful for egregious cases here? I mean, obviously in the county you may have the same thought, but in Tacoma Park, is that something that you could see?
Yeah,
being
it
helpful?
depends. Because a lot of times what we want them to do is comply. And so some of the smaller landlords, it's a one size fits all, right? So if you have, if they do raise the fines, then we have to issue the same to all of the landlords, not just that one. So if you look at the one size fits all, it may not work. A lot of times they want to, the smaller ones will comply, but a lot of time, and then we want them to, right? What we really are seeking is compliance. But if it needs to be, then yeah, it could work.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I think you raise a really important point, because what I've heard from some of our smaller landlords is the costs, right? So the cost of the repair versus the cost of, the fines and trying to make it make sense. Because what you don't want to do is create systems where it's such a deterrent to even rent at all, right? Especially for some of our smaller landlords. I thought I saw Councilmember.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure I understand how the different ordinances work from the county to the city. So we have our rent stabilization ordinance, which is more stringent in some ways than the county's. But when the county's ordinance, it allows for blocking rent increases if there are housing code violations. So does that county ordinance also apply in Tacoma Park already, or we would have to change our ordinance?
Yeah.
My understanding is that piece of code is in the county's chapter 29, which is landlord tenant, which we exempt ourselves out of. So we have different rules around landlord tenant relations. So it'd be something we would have to add in to our code.
Thank you.
Great. Wonderful. Not seeing any additional questions. Thank you both so much for coming out tonight. This has been a very enlightening presentation, and we really thank you for your partnership in making sure that we're protecting our residents. So thank you so much. Okay, we're going to go into our voting session. The first item is a single reading ordinance approving DHCA rental inspection contract. I'll turn things over to Mr. McNally to introduce this item for a vote.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. So you've just heard from DHCA, as kind of previously discussed. We have an arrangement with them to do our rental licensing inspections. So any rental unit in the city, the inspection is done by DHCA staff. And so we have a 3-year contract that we have with the county for this. The contract covers 2.5 county FTEs. So that's 2 full-time inspectors, and then the 0.5 is the administrative side. What we are proposing is renewing that contract for a further 3 years, starting with this coming FY26 and continuing through until the end of FY28. So the first year of the contract is estimated to be $317,000 and a little bit extra. It is adjusted annually every year as part of a process by which the county notifies us of their increasing labor and operating expenses costs. We will typically have potentially a back and forth depending on that increase, but then it is budgeted as part of our budget process. So that is a little bit about the contract itself, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. McNally? Councilmember Slagle?
One question, yes. In the presentation, great presentation we just had, there were 5 inspectors assigned working in Tacoma Park, and so this covers 2. So just how are the other 3 being paid? I'm just wondering.
So we directly fund 2.5 positions, but as part of kind of the county working with us, they have a team of 5 that covers this area. So in essence, we are paying for half of the work that's being done.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Seeing no additional questions, would someone like to move the ordinance authorizing staff to enter into a contract with the Montgomery County Department of Housing and Community Affairs for rental housing license and property maintenance inspections?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake, for moving. Thank you, Councilmember Honzak, for seconding. Just want to confirm with the clerk that given this is an ordinance, do we need to do a roll call? All right. So would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy,
Aye.
Councilmember Landman,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBallo,
Yes.
Councilmember Schlegel,
Aye.
Councilmember Gilbert,
Aye.
Councilmember Hanzak,
Aye.
Councilmember West.
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to move to our next item in the voting session. It is a single reading ordinance authorizing the use of State Revitalization Program National Capital Strategic Economic Development NED Grant Award to preserve affordable housing at 7520 Maple Ave.
And I will be recusing myself from this discussion and vote since I live at the property. So
Thank you very much, Councilmember Gilbert.
All right, so in 2022, we applied for a grant from the state of Maryland's Department of Housing and Community Development for assistance to tenant organizations who are exercising their tenant opportunity to purchase rights. In 2024, 7520 Maple Avenue, the residents were notified that there was a contract of sale for the property, and they formed a tenant association and explored their rights under the tenant opportunity to purchase. In June of 2024, the council authorized $55,000 of these grant funds that we are awarded by the state to make the good faith deposit. And what we are proposing here is keeping that $55,000 and then adding an additional $350,000 as a loan for the acquisition and renovation of the apartment complex by the tenant association's assignee of rights, Orlo, under their kind of LLC that they will own the property with, and tying our loan to the successful acquisition and renovation of the property, as well as compliance with the development agreement reached between the tenant association and the developer. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
So really quickly, because I know that we heard during the public comments concerns about the possibility of the tenant association needing to perhaps seek legal counsel should there be some form of default on the part of their partner Orlo. Can you speak to just briefly the rationale for why it's important for the city to actually have some money in the game, and how it may ultimately help us to help the tenant association to make sure that they get what they are entitled to?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that tenant associations always face, and Hampshire Towers, for example, faced, is that developers, especially the ones that are assigned rights, do their best usually to meet the terms of the agreement. However, sometimes they need a little poke or prod. And as noted in public comment, that can be difficult. I'm a renter in DC. Our building is going through the TOPA process there. And I can tell you that, there aren't a lot of options when it comes to kind of enforcing those agreements outside of going to court. By having some money in the game and tying our loan to the successful completion of the development agreement, it does allow the city to be a voice for our residents by being at the table as a lender, but then also having some sort of stick in the case that there is kind of complete non-compliance with it. Obviously, that's something we don't want to do. We want to keep our money in the deal and to see it burn off successfully. But it does allow us to speak with a voice that has the ability to kind of enforce some of the terms or to require repayment of the loan. And so the way the loan is structured is very similar to other loans that we've given out through these grant funds, which is kind of a 5-year period where the whole balance is due plus interest and then slowly burning off over a period of 25 years. So
thank you very much for that explanation. Are there any questions from council? Councilmember Schlegel.
Thank you, Director McNally. So I have been reviewing the agreement, and I just wanted to make sure I had as clear an understanding as possible that we all did of phase 1 and phase 2 of the renovation agreement. So phase 1, it says includes but is not limited to a new roof and repairs to the asphalt. So that's pretty clear as far as you can check the boxes whether it's done or not done. When it gets to phase 2, I will read this, and for my colleagues, it's on the 4th page. It says phase 2 will be subject to additional funding, probably not available for 3 to 5 years, and will include a much larger scope that may include modernizing elevators, heavy up of electric, individual unit HVAC systems, energy efficient windows, renovation of units, kitchens and bathrooms, and renovations of the lobby and common areas. So that's pretty much like everything and the kitchen sink there. As I'm reading that, I hadn't really noticed that. So how will it be judged? How is it a matter of negotiation? How is it judged whether the developers made sort of a good faith effort to expand that scope as much as possible? I'm concerned the tenants getting towards the 3 to 5 year mark would be saying, is this all we ended up getting for phase 2? And so how does that work?
So, I mean, the answer is it's a back and forth. Hampshire Towers has gone through this. It has taken quite a while for them to get across the finish line with the starting their renovation. A lot of it depends on what financing sources the group can tap. So, for example, can they get government, subsidy for these programs? Can they go out and tap private financing? A lot of that, what gets in there depends on kind of the cost and what lenders think is a reasonable use of those funds. The answer is that there will be a back and forth of kind of what's the most critical need. And part of this development agreement is ensuring that tenants have a place at the table. One of the things I'll talk about, and one of the reasons why the city has applied for this funding, is these rights don't kick in until a sale contract is on the table. So the tenants, if this deal were to fall through, for example, it would default back to the original kind of potential purchasers. They have politely declined to negotiate with the tenant association. And so this is kind of a back and forth, kind of what's reasonable, kind of providing some wiggle room for both sides, right? It's no agreement is perfect, but it does try to provide some sort of kind of timeline for when things are going to get done.
Thank you for that. And I do know that, you brought up Hampshire Towers, and, it is quite costly, and they have done, Orlo has, replacing the elevators, which required state grants to do all of the HVAC work, which required county, state, utility monies in order to do. So it takes time, but I think that one of the things that's important to note is that this particular company has done it, or at least been able to gradually accomplish the renovations over time and secure those funds. So I do have a little bit of comfort in knowing that we can kind of point to a clear example of where they've done the work and are continuing to do the work, which is helpful. Councilmember Landman?
I haven't seen the agreement that was in play in the other building with the same developer, so I'm looking only at this one, and I am struck by how, well, lawyers call them weasel words, but I don't mean to be, that's just the term, I don't mean to be, rude about it, but the initial phase even uses the word may and will consider as opposed to shall or will undertake, or, and so it feels, it's late in the day to be looking at this. We just got it this afternoon, and I appreciate you sharing it, but it does feel slightly open-ended, and I'll just say unenforceable, because when the language is so open-ended, it looks like it would be very difficult to take this to court and say that they have failed to carry out a commitment, because the commitments are so open-endedly phrased. So can you compare it in the language in whatever agreement underlay the other Orlo actions?
Sure. So what I'll say there is every tenant rights assignment and developer agreement is kind of by its nature boutique. And so one of the things the city did was we have helped the tenant association get a lawyer to be on the other side. Mm-hmm. So they were the ones doing the negotiation, representing the tenant association as part of this kind of process. What I will say is I am not a lawyer myself, so I can't speak to the kind of nature of how a court would determine one word versus another. What I will say is this deal is not quite as generous as Hampshire Towers deal, but there are unique cases around the Hampshire Tower deal, and that was done with a different context in a different time. What I would say is our interest is in helping represent and allowing the tenants to have a say in the future of their building. And that was the goal of these grant funds and kind of the goal of what the department has done in this case and why we're suggesting this loan be made.
Thank you. While, I recognize the points that Councilmember Landman is making. I see a lot of shalls in here as well. So, the developer shall take all actions that it reasonably can to acquire the property. The association shall cooperate. The developer shall begin the two-stage renovation program immediately after acquisition. So I do see that there's quite a bit of shall in the responsibilities section, which gives a little bit more more teeth. And while I recognize that there may be some may language, I think some of it is perhaps related a little bit more to things that perhaps you unless you can read the tea leaves, may not be able to immediately predict.
And what I will say is the primary lender for this deal is Montgomery County. They're putting in around $12 million. So we will not be the only ones getting in their ear about making sure that they do the right thing.
Okay, all right. So with that, would someone like to move the single reader ordinance authorizing the use of?
So moved.
Thank you very much. Would someone like to second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Schlegel. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy,
Aye.
Councilmember Landman,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Schlegel,
Aye.
Councilmember Gilbert, Councilmember Hansack,
Aye.
Councilmember Whiff.
Aye.
Great. All right. Well, I'm going to, can we take a 10-minute break so we can bring back Councilmember Gilbert? And then we will move into our last item for the evening.
Can I ask you a quick question about
I'm hoping.
Okay.
anything that's passed through, we already
this evening is the council priorities discussion. So one of the reasons everyone should have the massive markup of the feedback that's been provided across all of the council members. The only thing that I want us to spend a little bit of time, not long, talking about is I just want to highlight in the markup. Feedback. Okay, awesome. Just highlight a couple of things for folks to keep in mind. I will send the electronic version of this to members of council and city staff, just so that you all understand some of the changes and some of the points of discussion that might be useful just for clarification. So for example, there was Councilmember Landman made a suggestion to add safety to the community of belonging. And so one of the questions is for members of council, is advancing a community of safety and belonging what we are striving to do? And I'm not picking on Councilmember Landman, but this is just an example. The other point that I do want to highlight for folks is there are instances where there were additional strategies that were added to the document. So for example, Councilmember Wesolek suggested that under maintain our commitment to being a welcoming and inclusive community where all residents experience a sense of, Councilmember Landman added safety and belonging. One of the strategies that Councilmember Wesolek suggested was continue efforts that affirm and support LGBTQ plus individuals and families. I am on page 4. Thank you. So that's one example where a strategy has been added. One place that was a little tricky, I will say for me, in combing through the feedback that I do think might be useful for us to discuss is the fiscally sustainable government section. There was a couple of suggestions as a way to try to address the points of discussion during the last council member meeting on this particular, on the priorities around the fiscal sustainability strategy and the expenditures and revenues point. Just for folks that are following along, we're on page 5. And so for strategy 1, which was originally developed a long-term fiscally sustainable strategy, council member Dabala added for expenditures and revenues incorporating actions already taken. Council member Landman had suggested revising long-term strategy for fiscally sustainable government, addressing both sides of the ledger as a point. And I'm sorry, it's in terms of a point for changing fiscally sustainable government, revising that to revise long-term strategy for a fiscally sustainable government, addressing both sides of the ledger. Council member Dabala's change for that, develop a long-term fiscal sustainability strategy for expenditures and revenues, incorporating actions already taken. Councilmember Landman had a revision, explore ways to lower costs and improve efficiency. Yep. So it is on comments.
Oh, down here.
Mm-hmm. I didn't, because otherwise it would have just been too much to kind of have it all there. But
sort of say this.
yeah. Yeah.
So you're saying that number 1, those were suggestions for that set.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
May I just remind where that came from? That was actually a suggestion from the city manager, that it was unclear to have a title that sort of seemed to refer to both sides of that, but then is the first of the two bullet points had to do with efficiencies and so forth, and the second with revenues. And so that having the title that you were just talking about that I had suggested was something that came up in the context of trying to have the entire two-part components of this fiscally sustainable government strategy be reflected in the title, so that it would then fit with having part one being about spending and part two being about revenues. And that was the genesis of it.
And that was essentially what I was trying to do,
Yeah.
the same expenditure.
Yeah,
So of the three suggestions, two of them are different places.
Councilmember. So I think there's a couple points. So one, is there a need for a change to the title of fiscally sustainable government? And then two, because it looked as if folks were changing or trying to address it in different ways. There's Councilmember Landman is trying to change the title of the section. Councilmember Dabala is trying to incorporate it as part of the language for the first objective of that goal, right? And then Councilmember Landman also had suggested a tweak to the objective for the goal. So the goal language was originally, we want to basically achieve a fiscally sustainable government. It sounds like there's a thought that the goal should be to develop or revise a long-term strategy that it considers revenues and expenditures. And so the question is, what is the goal of what it is that we're all trying to do?
And by goal, you mean the
Fiscally, the big thing, the big title, the big item. Because the reason I'm bringing this up is because there was language that was tweaked to try to get at the expenditures and revenues point as part of the objective.
Right, and that's what I have. Okay, yeah.
Okay, so I just want to flag these because I know that folks haven't had time to kind of go through the plethora or the maze of all of the feedback that was received, but that's what's been, part of the fun with consolidating all of this
You
feedback.
have any other areas you want to flag for us?
Yep. So, the other area that I just want to flag. So there were a few places in the environmentally sustainable community that I do just want to flag. I think in going through a lot of the feedback, I think that everyone was striving to do the same thing. So I don't think there's going to be as much kind of need to kind of follow up, but there was one addition in terms of adding communication strategy to the section. That is on page 7 under the first objective, continue to expand the use of city media for how-to education and information sharing. That was Council Member Schlegel. And the rationale is in the comment that's associated with that item. So when you see the markup, you'll see that he highlighted the fact that there does need to be a need to make sure that we're educating and doing some of the work that the sustainability manager has been doing in terms of educating the community about climate mitigation activities.
Can I get another,
Oh,
can
that's
I
why
get
I
a
can't
better
click on it.
clarification?
Got it. Gotta have it.
Okay, so the things that like advancing community belonging, those are priorities. Or can we all agree on common language? Because I'm having a hard time following.
Yep.
And then I spend most of the time you're talking, just finding what you're referring to.
Yep.
So like the 5 things are priorities. Does that sound right? Like we could refer, well, and then what are the bullet points under that?
Yep.
What are
So,
they?
yep. So your top line priority goal is what's in bold.
Priority goal.
That's the goal. Yep. And I can bring back the presentation that I kind of walked through the different sections when we started this. So like what it is we're trying to achieve, then the sub items, like if we're looking at environmentally sustainable community, that would be the overall goal. The climate change mitigation, work towards zero emissions, that's the objective.
Objectives.
And then the strategies are what falls underneath. And then what is the desired outcome of the work that we're doing?
Thank you. I'm just asking because I don't feel like the words goal or objectives are in here, but you are clearly referring to them. So I want to make sure we all are on the same page. All right, thank you.
And if it would be helpful to kind of make that a little clearer,
Well, it doesn't say goal and objective.
Yep.
Yeah, she has a
Madam
point.
Mayor,
Like a normal work
think
plan.
I want to follow up on Councilmember Westlake's comment because the structure of this right now, I find confusing. Especially to have sort of these top line goals, but also the bullet points on page 1, and then to go back into them one by one. I think it would be clearer for us and everybody else looking at it. We could have like a title page that listed the 5 goals, but then to have the bullet points and that you're describing now as objectives, which I agree with Councilmember West. I wasn't sure which was which, and the strategies and outcomes and all that all combined in one place. We could like have the top line goal and then all that stuff follows from it instead of the current structure, which is sort of like half of it comes first and then is repeated later on in the document. I found it hard to follow along when we were discussing it the other day, and I confess I'm still finding it kind of confusing. I wonder if there are other people who would prefer a structure like that. I'm looking at you, Councilmember, because you seem to be our high-end grammarian here, so.
Oh, well, I just wanted to add that I agree. I find the structure of this document kind of hard to follow. I, at least personally, put that in my head for the next go round for 26, 27, because I know we want to move forward on this, and excuse me, I'd be happy to take a look at it and see about restructuring it because I think it would be helpful, but I don't want that to keep us from being able to move forward on this set of priorities.
I'm gonna suggest, I'm gonna suggest in writing so everyone can see it, just a couple of extra headlines that might sort this out for now. That get put in here to explain some of this.
Sort out the fiscal
Sort out-
sustainability language or the
No,
structure?
the structure.
Oh.
Well, you guys can look at it and decide if it's any good or not.
May I?
But I think I see
I think there's probably 2 main features that are just would make it a little bit clearer. One would be to have, as we have in the more comprehensive document, to have language such as goal and objectives appear. And then the other thing that I think Council Member Landman you're referring to is the fact that the first 2 pages I think are intended to be a summary that I believe is actually appears even on our city's website. So it's so what we're calling the priority goals are so generic that I think that would not really speak alone to the vast majority of residents. So it's a way to have a quick review whether you put it on there or not. I mean, you could just have it be something electronically that you can click on and it will, because you definitely want to be able to see a consolidated version quickly, right? But it's hard to do it when we're editing both parts at the same time, right? Anyway.
So can we go to what is it we're trying to achieve when we're talking about an fiscally
fiscal? Where are we starting?
Yep. So let's do fiscal.
Fiscal. Okay.
Right. So. So page 5. So what I'm asking for folks to keep in mind is what is it that we're trying to achieve, right? So Is it that we're developing a long-term strategy? Our goal is not, and it's perfectly fine. Fiscally sustainable government was something that included a lot of things. It included aspects of how we budget. It included aspects of how we communicate the budget, in addition to developing a plan. And it was broader because it incorporated more things. If the idea is that this priority for us is strictly about developing a long-term strategy, then that would be the goal. So just want to make that point clear. When it comes to the environmentally sustainable community, there's just a few, and that's on page 7. There are just a few places where there were some edits. And I think that there were some questions about, as I mentioned, education and information sharing was added. There was also just some points around the co-benefits. So there was some language that was cut. And I think that there were some, I believe, yep, number 2 under resilience. Councilmember Dabala, your language suggested cutting the co-benefits. Councilmember Landman edited co-benefits to include flooding risk reduction. So just want to make sure that what we ultimately end up with is clear. So Councilmember Landman, I put your comment because it would have been really hard to follow. It's a comment that's up linked to that particular item. And it says CM Landman also edited co-benefits, including flooding and risk mitigation. And I believe your edit was such as, like where the such as, heat island mitigation and flood risk reduction.
There may be a typo here, but it was supposed to be an example of the tree canopy contributing both to flood mitigation and heat island reduction. So it was just an example to show co-benefits, but somehow or other it got a little mangled up there.
Into the middle of another edit.
Yeah, it's somehow or other it's in the wrong spot.
Yeah, it's
but
too specific.
anyway.
Okay.
So it was me that took out the co-benefit.
It was you that took out the co-benefits.
Okay. It was in there last time?
It was in there last time.
Because I like the explain. Okay, we'll straighten it out.
All right.
That's why you tell me.
That's why I'm flagging these things.
Yeah, Mayor, seriously?
Yes.
Yeah, just like taking a step back and looking at the big picture on the environmental sustainable. So yeah, we want to have priorities and we can't have everything be a priority. I'm just thinking back a few weeks to how Councilmember Hanzak, you and I had kind of an exchange that was about, can you do both protection of people from effects of climate change while also still pursuing, say, like the greenhouse gas reduction goals in this particular 2-year period that we're looking at. And I think that was our biggest question that we needed to iron out, was whether we were going to go for a 2-pronged thing or whether we were going to say, no, we can only prioritize one thing right now. Here's what it is. So I just wanted to remind us that that was the big question on our minds, I think.
There was a point that you have in the comments from Councilmember Gilbert, though, about wanting to confirm, or about housing, wanting to focus on aspects of mitigation and also adaptation, presumably, for our housing stock. And trying to think about how these things could be priorities. We want to signal priorities that have to do with what we're doing on the public works side and also what we're doing on the housing side. And I think it does make sense to have climate resilience priorities that we clarify what they are on in each of those areas. And so in the housing area, it may be, that the focus is on keeping the properties that we do have to be more energy efficient, which is a huge component of our CO2 emissions, as well as reducing the cost for people and making their quality of life better. So maybe we could have a signal that gets to that point that Councilmember Gilbert had raised, because none of the programs that we mention here mention the housing aspect of it. So it's not a radical change, but it might be a way to address that. And I do think it's a good idea, because it's a co-benefit situation, very much so, if we can focus on the housing adaptation and rehabilitation. That might be a new bullet point, I'm not sure, or an alternative bullet point.
It could be the second strategy under Roman numeral 1, climate change mitigation. That kind of is working around it, but it's not naming housing.
Yeah, I don't know if you have a comment on that, Councilmember Gilbert. You're the one who raised the housing issue in the notes, so.
I mean, you were spot on with what I was thinking. I was having a hard time following, and I was wondering if that wasn't even meant for another category. But yeah, I remember it now, and yeah, it would be good to have some focus on that.
Can I ask a question then? I mean, there are lots of detailed edits in here as we're reading it right now, but are any of you suggesting that this needs to be, that a new almost like category at the top should be created to really clarify very clearly that we want to make it our top line priority, that we're seeking to prioritize all investments which provide co-benefits for mitigation and resilience, and that if that's not the case, to not necessarily prioritize it? No, that's not what you're saying.
No,
okay,
I
just want to make sure I'm not hearing that. Okay,
I was trying to say that it's so generally worded here that you can't tell that addressing the role of housing in meeting climate mitigation goals and resiliency goals is lost in the sauce. And we have had a very effective program with our sustainability manager and so forth to try and address some of the challenges that are climate related in our buildings. And I don't want that to get, left out of that we want that to continue to be a priority.
So this is an area we want comments. And is it possible?
Cindy, we can't hear you, Cindy.
Yeah.
Keep getting confused, but when the mics are on or off. Yeah. Is it possible for you to send a clean copy as well as the markup copy when you send it electronically? Because maybe when we read it without all the changes, it might make more sense. But I do note on this issue that it said buildings and transportation, and somebody, maybe it was me, took it out. So maybe all we have to do is add that back in, but that's something you want feedback on. Not right now. Okay. Do you know, I know you want to get through the other points that you want us to focus on. When do you want comments by? I don't want to lose that thought.
So I need comments by Friday.
Friday.
And I want to be clear, because my life has been very difficult with consolidating all of these different documents in various forms.
Yep.
I am going to send you a document that is an attachment. In that attachment, you will have a markup version, you will have a clean version. I need you to edit that clean version and send me back a document. Not a Google Doc, not a shared doc. I need a clean document that is attached. Why, Talisha? Because that allows me to merge documents. So I don't have to manually go through and consolidate everybody's feedback.
That's fair.
So you're going to get the document. You're going to get 2 versions. You're going to get a markup. You're going to get a clean. Don't do a Google Doc. Open the document, make your edits and track changes in the clean version, save it, send it to me. Okay? Then I will merge the documents. It will allow me to see who edited what in what color. Okay? All right. Okay.
Mayor, seriously, how will we be able to see other people's suggestions
that it has to happen in order for me to consolidate and resend out. Because otherwise, we would be in violation of the Open Meetings Act. So if everybody's working off of a shared Google Doc, that means that we are performing business with a majority of folks outside of an open forum, which is against the rules. So it's a lot easier, and I can move a lot faster if I have individual documents that I can easily merge, and then that way I can send it back out to you all so you can see what everyone else has edited. You can feel free to talk to one another, to each other individually as you're going through and making your edits. But you cannot, you really shouldn't work collaboratively on a document where there's a majority of folks that's actually in the virtual document. And I know it's hard because it's a lot easier to just want to throw a Google Doc up there and everybody just does what they want to do.
What I meant was, when you do a merge, if there are things that are in tension with each other, will we still be able to talk about those at the next council meeting so that we really understood where there was still remaining disagreement?
I will flag those. So that was one of the reasons why there's a lot of comments here. So if there are places where I see this. Sometimes I can go through the document and I see very clearly, this is just wordsmithing, and it's not that big of a deal. We can go through, and once we make it clean, just so that everybody can see themselves in the document, and then we go back, we clean it up, and we're fine. But then there are other places where there is this fundamental disagreement that needs to be discussed, and I try to flag those. Right. So you'll see in this document, I'm flagging, hey, everybody's talking about fiscally sustainable government in a slightly different way, or trying to address the same issue, but in different ways. Sure. And flagging who those council members are. It might be easier for me to just have conversations with folks just so that we can move this along. But in terms of trying to, because again, it seems like a lot because it's pretty intense markup. But the reality is there's just a few places where it's not the wordsmithing, it's something that's actually policy and requires conversation.
All right, so you want to keep going on what those are?
Okay.
And my other question was about when the city staff would have an opportunity to look at this.
They're gonna have to look at it at the same time as you all. So
Okay.
I will send it out
I just
to
want to
everyone.
make sure that,
Yep.
did somebody ask that question?
Yep.
That's all.
Have we finished this one?
Yeah.
Okay, have we discussed this last bullet about
city staff.
education?
So
'Cause
that,
that's a policy.
yep. And there's a couple places where
That's a new one, is it not?
yep, it's a new one.
Who may I ask?
That was Councilmember Schlegel.
I have a question about that.
What page
We're on page
I'm
7.
still on page 7, environment, because that is a policy and it's an additional bullet. Are you suggesting that we should put additional resources then into educational campaigns and information sharing?
No, I guess I was thinking of it as a pie. We have so much that we can do with communication to try to make a larger portion of that pie prioritized as education of this sort.
So then,
If I may push back, it's not that I'm against additional education, but I'll give you an example of why I'd like to push back. When there was in a previous council that I wasn't on, there was a suggestion that we needed to do work on trash and education, and a specific campaign was undertaken by one of the departments. I don't know that it would be interpreted that way, but by putting an additional bullet here, it almost asks for, in my mind, something additional than what we're already seeing from our from the existing FTE and whatnot. Personally, I don't think we need to do any more than what we are currently doing. I don't think that would be a wise expenditure of our existing resources, particularly in a fiscally tight year. That's just my opinion. I don't know if anyone else has anything on that, since it's an additional bullet.
And I will say for those items that are new, where because I do want to move this along, for those items where there may be disagreement amongst council, we may just need to do a hand vote.
Okay.
So
Wait, I don't have to. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah. So If it is a new item and there's still disagreement, we just take a vote.
Okay.
So
We
did
don't
you-
have to dive in.
Did you finish with fiscally sustainable pointing out? I only have one point.
Okay, what's your question, Councilmember Ball?
My question, backing up for a minute to fiscally sustainable, I only have one place where you marked where you raised concerns, and I must have missed something. Are there other places where you see disagreements?
There's also the addition of, I believe it was a bullet, prepare an adaptability plan for a recession or sudden fall in revenue.
Oh, yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. I did
That's
see-
new.
I did see that. Where did that go?
That came
where is
from
that? I saw it
Councilmember.
somewhere. Oh, you're talking
Councilmember
about fiscal. No,
Mhm.
sorry, I was back on sustainability. Schlegel.
Schlegel, okay.
I could volunteer writing one, I could say I didn't really.
I see where
I
you're
will just
coming
say,
from.
I will just say, because when the combined documents, and again, I hate to stress so with the Google Docs, I don't get to, I have to pay attention to the color of the edits to know who did what. And then
We
click on it.
apologize,
Able to
right?
see.
We apologize. I didn't know you could, I actually didn't know you could merge documents like that. That's an interesting feature. I thought we were saving you time.
So, so yeah, this was one that was prepare an adaptability plan for recession or sudden shortfall. That was in the merge document that was sent.
Yeah, well, I'll just say, I do think that would be prudent to do, and given what we heard from Ann Seacott this evening, I also understand that you can just say, well, we'll see how the chips fall, and we're not gonna make it a priority, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but it does seem like it's helpful to get a look around the corner so that if we're short on time and we have to make quicker decisions in changes in our budget, that we already had some help in thinking what those would be. I had another comment, but maybe anybody has something that they want to say about that. That was just my view.
Did you have a follow-up?
Could we get quick feedback on that from our city management office? What you would find most helpful in light of what is clearly, we are going to see some changes financially, and what would be most helpful to you, or what are you already planning?
I would say that's already part of our job.
Right, okay.
The reference to prepare and adaptability.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think, certainly it'd be helpful to clarify what is meant by adaptability plan, definition. Is it situational? That could be light treatment or heavy treatment. I'm not sure what's contemplated. That would be helpful. Yeah. Otherwise, part of our responsibility is to be able to offer recommendations to the mayor and council. Situated its circumstances change fiscally. To, again, give you viable options as to what to do. We try to be nimble enough, and I think in the preparation of our annual budgets, do have extensive internal discussions about what is, and not everything appears in a proposal that comes out, but certainly I can assure you the staff thinks about those things. We have resources we can draw on if we, say, on short notice had a major revenue source cut off, and what ideas might we have. I guess I'm just not really sure. It would be helpful to staff if you ultimately wish to add a bullet like this to well define what does an adaptability plan, and then ultimately we can respond better to the question: do we need to add such a document, or are we already postured to respond to those kind of situations?
Yeah, Mayor?
Councilmember Tabala.
It seems like there's something in between just let the chips fall and prepare a formal plan. So which might be what you're saying.
Well, it
Be
may depend on
prepared, but
what's-
maybe we don't need a formal adaptability plan.
I mean, we don't have the crystal ball, so it's situation. Let's say it was transportation money that suddenly got cut off, or it was police support like the SAP grant. Our responses would be different depending on the situation, i.e. what is the change that we're contending with? What is the challenge we're contending with? If it's global, that's one thing, and that might actually be easier to just say, well, we lost all intergovernmental funds or whatever. And you can say, okay, well, these are all the funds we receive, and this is what those funds support service-wise. But otherwise, we can respond to situations as they arise. It's more likely that it will be not everything all at once. It's more likely that it would be, maybe this or just this and that, in which case a discrete plan it's hard to envision what you do in just those situations. I think we just really would need to know, and usually we'd have a little bit of heads up. But if the idea appeals to you, I think I would suggest additional definition as to what is sought here.
And I will say, in going through the feedback on the strategy, it does appear that there are some that have very specific thoughts around what that should entail. And I want to encourage us to keep in mind that this document is not designed to be an implementation plan for staff, that it's really designed to be a way for us to clearly communicate what we think is the most important at a top level in terms of the work, and then allow for staff to do what they are being compensated to do or have the professional expertise in doing. And that is coming back to us with that plan that would include the aspects that would need to be incorporated. So that is the one thing that I did see. And there were some places where people were some places I know folks say, hey, it's not specific enough. It's not specific enough. And I do think we need some more specificity, but then there are other aspects where we don't want to cross that line into basically implementing the work of staff. Councilmember Landman.
Well, I'm now going to try and reflect a little bit of the input I've gotten from residents in my ward who I asked to give me input on the budget situation and priorities, and see whether this is sort of a question for you, City Manager Despirito, if you don't mind. A principle that we could have in our priorities under fiscal sustainability might be something along the lines of, if revenues fall below X% of the projected, then all construction projects will be postponed, or any particular construction project that might otherwise be on the agenda would be postponed. People are really worried about committing to any costly capital improvement projects right now, given what happened with the library's costs. In light of the fiscal uncertainty that they're experiencing, a lot of people worried about their jobs, the value of their house, et cetera, and they are nervous about the potential for ballooning costs. And so I think we could have, as this sort of Plan B idea or shortfall idea B, that we would call on the city manager and his staff to identify, what might be a break point where we would determine this is not the year to press start on projects that could, balloon up like that again. So that's just a question. Is that a clearer way of expressing to you what we would want in terms of a recession strategy or a Plan B strategy? Or does that just make you want to shoot me? Metaphorically speaking.
Well, I very much respect where the question's coming from. I very much respect the sentiment of residents who have those concerns, and I understand they're genuine. They're real. I would be cautious in recommending to the council any strategy that would impose rigidity on you upfront. In other words, okay, here's a trigger, and we're going to have like an arbitrary percentage of revenues drop below this, then this must happen. That to me would seem to tie your hands, consider other options that may be available in that moment that, oh, you know, well, we could have done this, we could have done that, but geez, our strategy says we need to do this. I'm a little concerned about having your hands tied. I think that would be the effect of trying to predefine a trigger that we really can't contemplate what direction it's coming from. You know, is it special revenues that have dropped? Is it general fund receipts? What is it? I think it's situational again. And to give, for the mayor council to maintain maximum flexibility in your decision making about the budget, even during the course of a fiscal year, or particularly during the course of a fiscal year, I think I would want you to have the maximum flexibility possible to consider the fullest range of options that staff could provide you. And that tends to stay away from trying to pre-imagine a scenario with a trigger that's rigid.
And I just want to say that this is not the document for that. If what you're describing, Councilmember Landman, would be something that would have to be solidified as in a resolution that could have been, or perhaps, you know, could have been something that was discussed while we were talking about the budget priorities and solidifying that. But actually it would make more sense being a part of, so for example, how we resolved as part of some of our budget, prior budgets, we resolved the reserve threshold that we wanted to maintain for our reserve, general fund reserve balance, right? 17%, that's our goal. That was codified through resolution as part of budget discussions. That's not the purpose of this document, right? So I do want us to be careful as to not try to identify things that would be better suited for a resolution in terms of trying to solidify policy through this adoption of these priorities, when they really should be something that would be more appropriate to be captured as part of a resolution.
And also, that makes sense to me. And also, this is one of the reasons that we do the quarterly financial reports, as well as other special reports. And we bring revenue forecasts, we bring, as we did recently, look at the CIP and PRR, and we can do a special report at the mayor and council's request at any time, or there may be times when I believe there's change in circumstances that you all need to know about, and I would respectfully ask that it be put on the agenda. But you also have the mechanism of budget amendments. I mean, checking in quarterly, you're following the trends. You know, if there's a precipitous drop in revenues or extraordinary expenditures that are beyond our control that we get hit with, or both, those are things that we can react to relatively quickly and use the mechanisms. You know, from a communication standpoint, it's things like the quarterly reports, or in real-time memos, reports from me and my staff. And some of the tools that you have are things like budget amendments, where we can present to you a palette of possible solutions for your consideration, and you can publicly, transparently address these as they arise.
And thank you, City Manager. I also want to just explain to colleagues that the cadence of the quarterly reports was also something that prior council solidified through resolution. So as we were finalizing, for example, the ARPA funding plan, one of the big things that prior council stressed was the need to make sure that we had these quarterly updates so that we could have a better idea of what our budget was looking like, especially in light of the fact that we were receiving all of these ARPA dollars. So I do think that it is important for us to, think of this document as, kind of establishing the general priority goals and potential ways in which we think it might be helpful for staff to address those goals in terms of specific projects that we know are ongoing. But then there may be other things that would be better suited for resolutions as we are entering into aspects of the budget cycle. Yes, Councilmember Slagle.
I appreciate that we're doing this patiently, but I also know we need to not overdo it. I just think there's something really important that I would like to, again, ask colleagues how they feel and really find out whether it can be a priority. And I alluded to this in my comments at the start of the evening. So I'm really asking, is there a way, is this a time when our city could, in a healthy way, make comparisons of not just, as it says in the first bullet point, or second bullet point, increase cost-saving efficiencies in government operations, but more broadly, service delivery. Because we saw earlier this evening that we used to have the service delivery of housing inspections done by city employees. Then those very people became county employees, and it's a county service now. Granted, we pay for it. And I am asking whether we could really think about a healthy, examination, like on a generational basis. Well, here we are as a city. Here's the services we do. We're also all county taxpayers. Here's the services the county does. I mean, no disrespect to our great services here. I'm just asking two questions. One is there interest in including that as a question to prioritize in thinking about fiscal sustainability? And secondly, is that something, and I guess that's a question for the manager and deputy manager, is that something that staff can ethically engage in, is actually exploring the pros and cons of, maybe taking part of a department or part of a service and moving it to be provided by the county? I don't even know the logistics of that, but that would be something where we would have to understand whether the legalities, logistics, everything. Or is that something where in a council manager form of government, the council needs to do that work themselves, maybe seek outside consultant help for that? So it's two questions.
If that were ultimately the direction of mayor and council, to examine any one service or multiple ones, it would probably best be done with some independence, certainly with expertise, which means the consultant. It would have to be budgeted. It will take a period of time.
Sure.
And it would probably be one at a time. That's how most cities that do look at cost benefit of such a thing tend to proceed. It's with outside assistance, and it'd be something that might be included in a future budget. Adequate funds to cover that. It's not cheap.
Sure.
This is not a back of the envelope exercise, and I certainly don't mean to suggest that city staff here don't have a level of expertise with which they could do it. It would be very time consuming, take them away from a lot of other duties. And then some might say, well, how independent are they? That's, the optics are always there. So, generally, and, there may be some things that we can find out quickly that are just not possibilities for a variety of reasons. That takes them off the list. There's others that, again, we're here to serve you. Majority of council wanted a serious look at one or two services. That would require, in my opinion, using outside expert, probably a firm. It would probably have to be built into a budget, take probably the better course of the year. These things also, there's just to bear in mind, while I understand there's a worthy goal of trying to look at our finances, considering contracting out, whether it's to the private sector or to another governmental agency like the county, frankly, do come with major impact to employee morale.
And
It's just something to bear. It's just something to bear in mind.
Yeah.
It's not purely an academic exercise. My own experience is that the extent you can do services in-house as efficiently as you can, you certainly have a greater level of control, accountability. That includes quality control. I think the accountability is very important, and this is to assure optimum services to the residents, as opposed to a provider that is not as directly. There's more of an arm's length relationship between us and that provider than oftentimes the service level can be affected.
Thank you. Councilmember Westland.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to respond to this, that Councilmember Schlegel, that like in conversations I've had, or this is to say, I don't think that I would advocate for the council to take any major steps towards looking into that. One, I feel like in conversations with staff and others, it seems like the likelihood of cost savings or ability to do these things is remote. I think also the understanding that we're getting such large payments now from the county and for tax duplication, which was not the case in the past, I think that makes up for some of this. I know anecdotally what I had always heard in my neighborhood was that we got nothing from the county, and I wasn't even aware that in recent years that had really dramatically gone up. And yesterday, Councilmember Lamont and I had our briefing with Chief Duvall, and he was saying that the night before at the Police Advisory Board, it was the idea of, do we ever want to outsource our police or keep this? And it was a unanimous, oh no, we want to keep our police force. So I think there could be areas worth examining, but I don't think it's worth that now, especially because I think what City Manager DeSpirito is saying is right, that we would want to do an outside consultant and make sure we're being thorough. And I think instead focusing on getting our house in order is I think what the focus is. And as I've been looking again at this fiscally sustainable part, I'm kind of reframing the first objective as getting our house in order. We have the savings funds. Do we have enough in our savings funds? Do we need more in these? It's making me think about those things. Can we trim the fat here and there to tighten things up? And I think for this coming year, focusing on that and what we can contain here, I think is a better priority for us.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. And so I just want to say that I fully understand residents' concerns. I get it. I understand. I have never been so afraid to watch the news before in my life, because it seems like every time you turn on the news, it's something bad happening somewhere in the world. And I understand the fact that, as we've heard, assessments for some have gone up, even though the tax rate has been the same. I think that one of the things that, to piggyback off of Councilmember Westlake, that's important for us to do is to get our house in order. I think that while I hear the concerns that residents are raising around our capital efforts, I will say this staff has been working tirelessly to get third-party monies to incrementally get towards the point where we can actually seek funds for construction. I think that often residents may be concerned that we talk about public works building and we're going to build it tomorrow. We all know, how long have we talked about this library? And we still haven't had that official ribbon cutting to walk through the door yet, right? It's been about 10 years, right? how long have we talked about the rec center? We still haven't gotten that, right? Long story short, these things take time. And so the reason it takes time is because it takes an incremental process to get the resources necessary to move to that next phase of development. And so we would be insane to not make sure that our District 20 delegation knows that this is something that we ultimately want, and to be able to secure monies from them, or to talk to our congressmen, senators, to let them know about what we're trying to do in the city to try to get monies from them, or to try to figure out whether or not there's other monies within the county or elsewhere. But in order to secure those monies, in many cases, you have to have full-on plans and designs, which means we have to ask for money for designs, which means we have to. So it's a very long and iterative process. So I do, again, fully understand everyone's concerns about budget. I understand everyone's concerns about making sure that we are being as fiscally responsible as we can be. I just don't want folks to think that we're just living high off the hog and out there just procuring and asking for a bunch of money for buildings that we're trying to build tomorrow. It's just simply not the case. But I do think that we would not be doing our due diligence as a city if we weren't constantly if we weren't continuously advocating for resources for the city based on the options and the opportunities that present, which usually relate to either capital or some sort of operational fund. So, I hear the resonance, but I do think it's important for us to make sure that we're alleviating some of those concerns by just stating the facts of the cadence in which construction has to happen, the fact that we have to ask for these monies well in advance of us being able to actually put a shovel in the ground. It is 10:44. If folks would indulge me for 1 second, we've talked about fiscally sustainable government for a minute. And we've talked about the environmentally sustainable community. One thing that I do want to highlight for folks is the engaged, responsive, and service-oriented government. So there was a couple of strategies that were suggested. New ones. For the first, under the first Adopt Innovative Culture, there was a develop targeted outreach and communications techniques that are more appropriate for specific hard-to-reach groups in the city. That was one that was added. And then for the second objective, there was adapt or revise these council priorities as appropriate in response to reviews of committee and task force recommendations. So the first, I believe that was that Councilmember Duvall? Yeah. Yep, that was you. And that was, I think, trying to get at some of the discussion that we had previously around how to structure the need for communication amongst diverse groups. And the second item, I believe, was Councilmember Landman. And it was, I believe, in an attempt to try to follow up with on the committee recommendations. And so I will just say that for the second item, in terms of revising the priorities as appropriate in response to reviews of the committee and task force recommendations, I don't think we should necessarily have to revise the priorities in response to the task force recommendations. And it could just be my skew of the fact that I know how long a lot of this stuff takes. So by the time we have a task force that has recommendations that is different from what is generally here, that we would then have to take some action upon, your term is up. But I question whether or not we should tweak council priorities and instead just make sure that as is stated in the bullet, in the prior bullet, that we are being responsive to the recommendations.
Madam Mayor, I don't remember writing these words. I don't know if they're mine. They have the yellow highlight next to them, so maybe that tells you, and your initials are next to some of these. So I won't say it's brilliant because I don't know if it's me or you, but it doesn't look brilliant. It doesn't look brilliant as worded, but I think maybe
it wasn't me. I would just say it wasn't me.
I think it was me. I'm the not brilliant one.
I had to keep track of the colors.
Well, I must be colorblind because the color thing.
No. In your markup, yours I think were pink. I think his was purple. And
that is totally unacceptable. I do not want my markups to be pink in future, and I'm going to speak for the people in charge. But I think the point here was that we have not yet taken on board as a council, for example, the sustainable banking recommendations, even though that was what, like, the committee had made those recommendations, at least this council had not had an opportunity to reflect on those. And so the question was whether, we are ready to say what ought to be the priority for the staff if we ourselves hadn't yet gone through the recommendations and decided whether we wanted to ask the staff to follow through on them, if I'm making sense here. So it is a two-step process whereby first we decide, okay, we said to the committees, we want to make sure that we look at your recommendations and take them seriously, and then decide how to act on them. I think that was like the conversation we had specifically with the sustainable banking folks. And I know there were, but we don't want to just say we'll do it. We want to look at what they said, as we said we would, and then decide whether we need to say something, come back to whether there's a priority that needs to reflect them. So I think that's the thinking behind it, but it's not artfully worded perhaps in this document. But how else do we indicate that it's to the people for who put all that work in and are waiting to see what we're going to do, and we haven't decided how we want to move.
And I realized that, thank you, Councilmember Lamon, because I realized that there was a bullet that needed to be pushed down, which I think does the job, right? Ensure the city responds to recommendations made by these committees and task force in a timely and meaningful way.
Yeah, that works for me. Yeah.
Okay.
I just, I think I put this one in. I guess I'm starting to understand that this document is viewed more as homework for staff than as a to-do list for us. I've been thinking all along that council priorities means, hey, this is stuff we want to work into our agenda in some cases over the next 2 years. And so I thought that by putting the bullet point, it would make sure that revisit got on our agenda, or it might help make sure that we remember to do that, help us all.
Yeah.
But am I misunderstanding? This is not like a to-do list for us.
It could be, right? Like there could be some aspects of implementing a strategy that would require some sort of council action, right? But for the most part, usually what we're asking for it relates to staff. Even if it is a council action, staff typically have to do something in prep to provide us with the information necessary in order to take the action. So, for example, I actually take the ensure the city responds to recommendations made by these committees and task force in a timely and meaningful way. I actually take that as an action for council, right? Because that means we have to make sure that we're working these into the agenda. That means that we may have to do resolutions if there are some next steps that we want staff to follow up on, like the staff, they need to make sure that a majority of council wants them to go down specific paths, right? So that may mean additional work for council in order to make sure that that item happens, right?
Okay.
But I wouldn't necessarily say then that means council needs to do this, and we add all of that to this document. I'm interpreting that to mean by adding this bullet, there's work for us to do.
Yeah, so if what starts with ensure is actually a bullet, then
And that kind of covers it.
So
that's
now,
sort of the spirit.
remember, it's in here, but it's the second half of the preceding bullet.
Yeah, I just hit enter to make it its own bullet because I think it was supposed to be its own bullet.
Okay.
May I say something? There's also a question of filling in new council members on what has transpired in previous councils with respect to, what's to committee recommendations, the Sustainable Banking Task Force being a classic example of that. So I'm not saying there needs to be a bullet about that. I think I like the idea of dropping down that ensure and then not having the council priorities piece.
Okay. All right, mark it.
And I think there is something coming on sustainable banking. That's what's
Yep,
that last
there'll be a memo. The housing and community development and equitable quality of life. There was a couple things that I did want to flag. For the housing piece, there was a desire to add housing quality. I believe Councilmember Landman, if I did not mix up my pinks and purples, and improve housing conditions in existing housing was added to the first strategy. And I just asked, could it just be revised, improve to instead of saying, continue to build partnerships with nonprofits, foundations, financial institutions, county, state, and other outside entities to expand affordable housing options in the city. And I was just saying, and improve housing quality, because it says this language here is and improve housing conditions in the existing housing.
So just use the word quality instead of conditions.
Yep. And improve housing quality. And then the other, Councilmember DeBala, I believe you added and advance the development of missing middle housing options, because the first bullet was about affordable housing, and the second and condos are that missing middle. So, and then Councilmember. No, I'm just confirming that that was the rationale for it.
Excuse me, can I just clarify there? You just said condos. So when we say missing middle, we're talking about home ownership? Or are we talking about home ownership and rental? And do we need to be clear here? Just for everybody to know what we mean by missing middle. Is it all of that? That this particular bullet currently talks about ownership.
Yeah. So Councilmember DeBala, if you meant both rental and home ownership opportunities, that language may need to be tweaked. And then Councilmember Landman added an item, evaluate opportunities to expand availability of accessory dwelling units. I guess, Councilmember Landman, what are your thoughts around what the city's capacity would be to do that? Like, what would be the city's authority to do that?
There are a number of different things that affect the availability of accessory dwelling units. Some of them are addressed at a county level, some at a state, and some at a city level. And I could take a couple minutes if you want, but I mean, basically, we have certain things that we do at a city level that make it less likely that people will either build or legally license accessory dwelling units, so that where we could provide some regulatory relief. I think we could definitely provide an equivalent tax holiday for the incremental value of an accessory dwelling unit in a single family home that's owner occupied. That would be the equivalent of what we have done for multifamily new units that are going to be built in the city with the tax thing that we already enacted. So I think that's an area where we could provide a financial incentive, and there are ways that the county has set up a housing fund that is intended to enable people to finance an additional unit, that they could essentially use the development of the unit as the collateral for getting the loan to build it. We could provide this sort of advice to purchasers or that kind of thing, that through our housing department potentially, on how to go about doing things like that. to encourage ADUs to be built. Every one of our 60 properties probably has, or many of them have space for helping us to meet our additional housing unit goals. And new undeveloped lots are in short supply, whereas those lots are in very plentiful supply here. So it's a way to meet our goal of 200 new units by 2030 or 2035. Over 10 years, 200 new housing units over that time period by looking for nooks and crannies to put them in, big nooks and crannies. So, I mean, I don't think it's extremely costly. There's a potential for the tax break to cost us some projected revenues that we don't have in pocket yet, but that would also, over time, increase the value of the properties and increase our number of housing units.
Madam Mayor, may I ask for a clarification on one thing? Just a newish guy question. Has council previously taken a position on ADUs, or is that a policy discussion yet to come? I know in some communities, there's neighborhoods that very much want them, and there's other neighborhoods very much don't. And that's, Rockville was a classic example, where the neighborhoods have completely different opinions about ADUs. I'm not casting any doubt on the potential value of those. But I just wondered, is it already been determined by the council or otherwise expressed that supporting, expanding availability of ADUs is a council goal?
I would have to go back and take a look at the Housing and Economic Development Strategic Plan. I cannot recall whether or not ADUs were mentioned in that document. I'm trying to rack my brain given that it's 11 o'clock, because I remember at one point when the county was talking about ADUs.
There were zoning changes made to make ADUs less difficult at a county level, and I wasn't on the council then, but I was in the process of licensing an ADU myself, and the council addressed that, and I believe did support.
I think
the revisions.
we
very
did.
much so.
It was transit oriented, and I believe we did.
No, we did.
Yeah, and so, and they were particularly, one of the key zoning amendments that the county made was to eliminate the requirement that you have an on-the-record hearing over the availability of parking off-site if you didn't have available parking, like a driveway or garage or something, and you wanted to have an ADU. And the city of Tacoma Park in urbanized area already, tight parking nevertheless supported that amendment as well. So I think that the previous council stood behind it. And I will say I have heard from some residents who want to make sure that whatever we do does not encourage a whole bunch of Airbnb ADU units. So any kind of incentive that we give, tax incentive that we would try and enact, I would be very careful to construct it in such a way that it was not a tax break available for purposes of building, hotel rooms, so to speak.
I can add, it looks like under the objective to increase the number of units in the plan, under strategy C, encourage and facilitate ways to allow purchase or rental of single-family homes by people of moderate incomes through initiatives such as broadening down payment assistance programs, increasing available tax credits, encouraging use of accessory dwelling provisions, encouraging donations of property, etc. Would that cover what we're talking about?
I think so. That's why I was like, I feel like it was in that document.
So it might be in here more, but it's in there under the producing more units part of the plan.
So I think the big question for council is, one, do we feel like we have enough information at this time to make this a specific strategy, or is there a way,
Yes,
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, I think that this is phrased to be the first step in the process. Evaluate opportunities, and it's not asking that much in year one. I think in order to figure out if this is an effective way for us to meet our new housing unit goals, we need some more opportunity. We need to take a look at what the different options are before we push ahead.
Can I ask a question?
Councilmember Devon.
Yeah, so maybe the question, one of the questions when the staff and management, city management look at this is whether, is how much work something like that first step might take. And if it's possible with knowing how short we are on housing staff right now, but assuming that we get a couple more in the positions that we already have. So I don't know what the timeline on all that is.
The zoning and the permitting of ADUs would be at the county end.
Yeah,
And a lot of what might be suggested here might ultimately be a request by the city. Answer certain questions for us or look into certain things. related
but
to
that does
ADUs,
take,
but
my question is about staff time
Yeah,
here.
I
And-
can't
Yeah,
speculate about that.
okay, never mind then.
Yeah, and again, I'm not presenting any opposition to this idea. I just wanted clarity as to whether this question's already been answered. You know, are ADUs policy standpoint?
From policy standpoint.
A council objective strategy already. It's written as if it is, maybe it is. David showed me in the 2019 housing strategies document, it does reference support for things, multiple techniques, including dwelling units. I don't know if that would be something that you to stand on, or whether any of that needs to be revisited. It's entirely up to, that was a different council. This council. I'm just bringing some perspective from having been in other communities, that usually different parts of town have very different opinions about the desirability of separate dwelling unit, backyard of home.
I also, and we're after 11, so I really want to bring this discussion to a close. I also want to remind folks that we are talking about until 2026. Like, we're talking about 2 years. And we've talked about displacement here, which requires HCD. We're talking about missing middle. We're talking about, there's a lot of things that we're looking to have, and then all of the traffic calming stuff, which also involves HCD. It's not to say that there can't be certain things that are done that falls outside of this, but when we are making certain things a priority over the next 2 years, I think it is important that we keep in mind the overall volume and realistically what are we expecting to happen in over that course of time. Don't have to have the answer right now, but it's just as we're going through, just kind of keeping that up at the forefront of your minds in terms of in 2 years. Councilmember Slagle?
Oh, you wanted to follow on
I
that?
do.
topic?
Just
I'll
quickly,
see.
I want to respond to the city manager's question about the strategy. Is it still relevant? That's the strategy we've been using as the basis for everything that has happened in this past council with respect to adopting tax credits, et cetera. And as far as I know, the strategy has the year 2026 on it as the end year. And I think that it's the answer is yes. Whether it's, the personal priority of everybody here, I don't know, but it is part of this strategy that we are currently using to guide us in our other housing strategy elements.
Thank you, Councilmember Landman. Councilmember Slagle?
Yeah, and I think, Councilmember Lehman, I think it might be 2019 to 2030 in there. So I had a question or a concern about this. Within Roman numeral 1 strategies, the third bullet point, it strikes me as really vague. Revise sections of the housing code specifically sections on rent stabilization. And I worry when I see that it might leave staff with no sense of direction, or it could lead staff to make an assumption that we were looking for a certain package, and then that's brought forward, and a healthy debate hasn't happened. So I had put in a comment that might have been lost, on that, and I said, I'm suggesting that we agree on how to clarify this strategy. Did everybody find where I'm talking about?
That's it.
I see it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
We see it.
It's on page
On
10.
page 10.
Page 10, bullet 3, strategy.
Under item 1, there's the third bullet point says revise sections of the housing code, specifically sections on rent stabilization.
Yep, we can, let's, for city staff, let's have, the, acting HCD director, Mr. McNally, take a look at that, because there are a few other places. I know we've talked about, aspects of displacement and other types of things that were related to the MMPA, that they're still finalizing, including, you know, the language in the code around the credits, so.
My comment, if I could just finish, it would have been, our goals could be like, we might be thinking wildly different things. It could be that we might be wanting to incentivize the construction of new rental housing. We might be making sure we want to do that without generating displacement or the loss of affordable housing supply. Or we could be revising the rent stabilization code to enable ongoing maintenance, upgrades, sustainability improvements. So, like, are we talking about quality, quantity, revenue enhancement? Yeah, there's such a range of possible objectives underlying that it makes me uncomfortable just to have it vague as make revisions as a priority.
Okay, we are at 11:09. Can we move on to transportation?
Before we do, so can we just say in summary that several of the bullets under number 1, the strategies, have, different people have questions, so we should get feedback on all of these, because then the next one, continue to work on tenant rights, and then the last one we just talked about, the accessory dwelling units. So that whole section, maybe you want people to focus on? No?
I'm asking people to focus on the whole document. I'm asking people to look at your comments in comparison to everybody else's. I am flagging those places where there may be disparities, or discrepancies, but there are sections that people are highlighting additional concerns. I'm asking people to please spell out those concerns in the document that they send back.
Thank you.
All right?
Mayor, seriously, I just want to make one. I had spelled out those concerns, but they didn't make it in. So
Yes.
that's why I was reiterating.
And that's why it's gonna be really helpful if I get single markups from individuals, because it makes it a little easier to see the feedback.
Thank you.
All right, so transportation. So, it looks like there were a couple of items that were added. The first is continue to explore options for cameras on stop signs and high-risk locations. That was added. That was in the markup. I attributed it to Councilmember Lambin, but I could be wrong.
You're right. It is something that I added, and it relates to the legislation that we hope to see enacted this year. And having spoken to the chief about this just the other day, it's a process, once you get permission to do this, of getting the cameras, getting them in place. It's a major potential revenue generator once it's in place, besides it being a major safety improvement. So we know we're going to not be having the speed cameras next year because they aren't generating revenue anymore, and people have had to slow down because of stop signs, but they're not stopping at the stop signs, all of them. And so this is the next step in our pedestrian and other safety game plan, especially around schools, which is the language in the pending legislation with the stop sign cameras in school zones, if it's enacted. Obviously, if we fail in the legislature, this goes away.
So, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. You're probably gonna go where I'm going.
So in that case, I think the way it's explained, continue to explore options. We know what the path is. So
Yeah,
there's no,
it's true.
yeah, so exploring options might not be quite right.
Continue to,
Push for.
to attempt
Advocate.
to attempt to place cameras on stop signs or take the next steps to place
Advance
cameras.
efforts.
Rephrase it.
There, it's over there.
And I guess my
Advance.
my only question is,
Do we need
do we need to say this at all, right? Like, if this is something that we're already, this is a legislative priority, we've communicated it as a legislative priority, we've communicated it as a legislative priority multiple times in our work with D20 and when we solidify our LARs to MML. So with this being very specific, do we need to make it a council priority for the next 2 years? Or is it enough to say, hey, if it doesn't pass this year, we're going to include it as our LAR as part of what we try to get in a legislative advocacy requests?
Just use the word support.
I mean, this is
Continue to
not
support.
about the legislation. This is about our implementation, once the legislation gives us permission to move ahead with it.
But we can't,
does.
yeah, but we can't move forward unless the legislation passes. So for us, and there's some things like that we've been waiting on for a really, really, really long time. Good cause is in here, right? We've been pushing that for years. So
It can be rephrased.
I mean,
And the question
in
about whether
fiscal
it needs to be here at all
2026,
is very, is a,
yeah, in
is
fiscal,
valid.
sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I'm done.
In fiscal 2026, we will know if this was enacted or not. I think your suggested alternative language, advance efforts to install cameras at stop signs at higher locations, is a really good rephrasing, because we think we're going to have the, obviously, if we don't have the authority, it'll be a legislative priority again. But if we do have the authority, I do think it's a good priority for us to flag, because it will take work from the police department and everybody else to make it happen. And, you know, it's a huge safety concern all around the schools to make it happen. So I hope we can keep it as a priority.
And I will say that this is, in terms of a legislative priority, the stop sign cameras, I want to say this is is it our 3rd year that we've requested it?
Just say it.
This is the 3rd year that we've requested it. But
If county can have it, we can have it. And they got it last year, so it's our turn.
So if folks can kind of take a look at that to see whether or not there's any additional edits. And then there's the last one was implement new data-driven processes for traffic calming and sidewalks and identify any useful adjustments to the process. And that was you.
Okay.
So that was another. Okay.
There was some reason I thought it was.
Okay, so we've gone through. So the big thing that would be helpful for me as you all are going through and providing your edits is if you can give me an idea of which of the objectives and associated strategies that you would consider to be part of your top 5. So if you could do anything on this list, what would be your top 5 things to make sure that we get done? And that gives me some insight into what the priorities might be for us to ultimately highlight as part of a resolution, a draft resolution.
Just so you said the top 5 objectives.
It can be, because I will say we mixed it up last year, and so we don't necessarily have to. First, in some cases, we picked a specific strategy. So, like for example, last year was we need to hire a city manager. That's a priority.
Okay.
But in other cases, we might have said, hey, you know what? We don't want to pick between our children when it comes to housing because we need it all. let's just say that ensuring a range of safe, high quality, blah, 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 and all of the strategies that are bundled within that are a priority.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. I am sorry, it's 11:17. Any other questions, thoughts? All right. So I'm gonna send this out to everyone. Other than that, I think we're ready to call it a night. Anyone have any questions, thoughts, concerns before we adjourn? All right, awesome. Everybody have a great night.
I love that. Any last thoughts? I got the gavel, but I'm sure if you have a comment, I'm ready.
You know when I'm ready to go. I just go quiet, real quiet. Even if I got